Let us begin tonight's deliberations. What I think we need to do is we're going to focus on the three issues that I outlined in the email that I sent you, which is the map,
And 2 and 3.
what's that?
And 2 and 3.
The map 2 and 3, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'd like to do, if you guys don't mind, is go through this in the order that was presented in Ms. Creasy's document. And what James and I have talked about doing is each commissioner will present in a minute or less what they'd like to do. Again, going down the document Ms. Creasy sent us, because these are your comments.
Oh boy.
And if there is no staff recommendation, then we will quickly deliberate and see if there's any consensus. If there is no consensus, we will then settle on a vote to make a recommendation. If there is a staff recommendation, or if James has something he wants to bring to bear that he may not have remembered to do in this document, he will also step in to remind us what we need to do. So with that, did you guys all get Ms. Creasy's document? Ms. Creasy?
Can I just do a couple logistics really quick?
Oh, sorry.
Just want to let our viewing audience, whether in person or virtual, know that we're taking written comments this evening. So written comments that are submitted during the meeting will be attached to the minutes for this meeting. We've got note cards and pens if anyone in person would like to use those. Also, Mr. Palmer is supposed to be watching us from afar due to a family illness, and Mr. Habab, of course, noted that he wouldn't be with us this evening.
Ms. Creasy, Mr. Chairman, have we had a call formally? I know that there was a recognition of a quorum, but perhaps calling the meeting to order.
Yeah, I thought I did. I said we are now in order because we have a quorum.
For the record, we note the presence, in addition to you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Duranzio, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Stolenberg, and Mr. Soli Yates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
FOIA can bite you.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you. Right, is there any objection to the way that we'd like to proceed? Just going down the document and presenting?
So I'm fine with that to start. I did have some suggestions, I think, that did not make it into this document.
All right, let's
so if we
go
could just circle back
let's
to
go
those.
through these and we'll,
Discovered I had some leftovers.
More pages? Okay.
That I can,
let's go through section 1. And if there are things in section 1 did not make it into the document, then bring those up. Then we'll go to section 2, et cetera, blah, 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 iterate. Section 3, iterate. All right. Page 1, article 2, section 2.2.2.A1. Whose recommendation was that?
mine.
Walk us through what you'd like to do.
So,
You got 1 minute.
well, I can certainly take all 60 seconds, but I'll try not to. So the question I had was, it was really more of a question, why aren't we at 2,500 square feet across all 3 districts? It doesn't seem to make sense to have RA at 6,000, the other at 2,500. So really for discussion, why are we at 6,000 and what's the point? And I just don't have and that's my issue there. I think it makes more sense to be uniform at 2,500, that there are circumstances we're going to have smaller than 6,000 square foot lots, and it's a convenient place to start.
And let's begin with Mr. Freeze to see if there is there any logic behind that.
Boy, I'm trying to remember back to that conversation I think we had at the commission some number of months ago, many months ago. I mean, I think we landed on 6,000 based on, you might have to help me out here. I remember you were
The idea
talking-
was standardizing minimum lot size across the city. Historically, we have kind of R1 large lot and R1 small lot. That's a
Yeah.
result of R1 large lot's the original R1. R1 small lot was introduced in 1991, and they kind of had a divergent and then convergent evolution that brought them to different standards.
But 6,000 is.
6,000 is the current
Is
small
the
lot.
current,
Requirement they're talking.
and I think,
So they started.
it's largely consistent with a lot of neighborhoods as they exist today, and I think there was a sense that we would, my sense is that it was a preference for maintaining that standard.
I didn't get that sense at all. I thought we were talking about 3,000 square feet across, at that time, we were talking about, what about 3, what about 2,500? Let's think about it. And then at one point, we were using some smaller number in general, and now we're at 6,000. So I don't, I'm looking for a reason for why it's not 2,500, other than the fact that we decided to be
You know,
6,000.
Ultimately, it's a policy decision.
All right.
I mean, there's not a magic reason to any of this. What I would say is that we've said throughout in the comprehensive plan that we're trying to introduce density into the neighborhoods of the city, but do so in a way that's sensitive to that existing context. And I think the 6,000 played into that decision.
In my
But it
recollection, this was a bit of a nod to council, because of that we saw council wanting to lean more towards the larger size and the smaller size.
Right, but if we've got, I mean, if we're gonna be going to minimum lot sizes in B and C at 2,500, I mean, I think the same obtains. And if we're using sublots, the whole 6,000 as a starting point doesn't, I mean, you can abrogate it there, right? You can chop that 6,000 into you can have sublots within that 6,000.
Yeah, but the lot itself defines the density, right? So the sublot, so the lot defines the density at up to 3 units, right?
Right.
The sublot doesn't allow you to expand beyond that. You can still
Correct.
only put 3 units on that 6,000 square foot lot, even if you sub them out.
Right,
The
so,
difference is if you reduce the
Yeah.
minimum lot size, now you can put those 3 units on each of those 2,500 square foot lots.
if you can, at 2.5 floors. And to me, to me, it just seems simpler to make it 2,500, and if I don't, there are gonna be very few circumstances where the setbacks, et cetera, is gonna work for a 3-unit building on a 2,500 square foot lot, right? Unless you've got teeny tiny units. So, that's, I
So
don't-
what exactly are you wanting to do? You
I
want
want them uniformly at 2,500. I see that.
A, B, and C,
A, B,
2,500.
and C, 2,500 across the board, why not?
So
And the reason we have, why not, is that, well, we're not doing it, and I don't.
I think in another maybe interesting way to frame the question is why are we at 2,500 and not 6,000 in B and C? And I guess the argument I'd make for that is that, you know, we still have the frontage requirements anyway, which are gonna be the dominating factor
Mhm.
almost always because of the depth of lots. And so it encourages rear alley loading and smaller, kind of a finer grained block size and, you know, kind of pedestrian and vehicle access in those areas where we're adding more density. And so I think it makes sense there to incentivize those things in order to kind of reduce the impact of that density by relegating vehicles and other things to the rear.
And how does it not apply for RA?
I
Do
think
the same, if you're gonna have those circumstances. I mean, I also look at sort of, we may be making life more complicated for us than we need, because there are areas in the city where we've already got chopped up, where we've got oddly shaped undeveloped lots, such as the Magnolia property, whatever that is, already platted lots behind JPA and, what am I thinking about? Fry Spring, JPA.
Azalea Springs.
Yeah, Azalea Springs. You know, where there could be circumstances, you just want to reshape all of them because they don't work anymore, which those don't. I mean, those are kind of silly.
So just so I know what you're saying, you're suggesting 2,500 A, B, and C.
Correct.
And you're suggesting 2,500 A and then 6,000 B and C, or what do you
No,
suggest?
The
Oh,
opposite.
The other,
Yeah,
6,000,
which is what
okay.
it is now. Yeah.
Is there a compromise available, or?
Well, he's saying is where things are now, and I'm saying I want the
You want
change.
2,500?
Chair, I would like to chop the baby in half.
Please.
5,000.
Why?
2,500 times 2. It's
Yeah.
a reason.
You also do have a lot of lots that are smaller than 6,000 in the city, right? Like, that's kind of the standard Belmont size lot. Over in 10th and Page, 5,000 or 2,500 is more common.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for keeping it as staff has had it at 6,000 and 25.
All right, I think we've got all the cards on the table. Let's just go around the table. Carl wants to keep it as it is.
I like the idea of 5,000 as a nice round number, but I don't feel strongly about changing it.
Can you live with not changing it? Can you live with going with staff's recommendation?
I can definitely live with it. 5,000 makes some sense to me, and 6,000 just seems like a random number.
I think the vote is 3-2, because I like to leave it where staff has got it.
So where are we at here?
6,000.
6,000, 6,000, you're, sorry? You're at 6,000, you're at 5, I'd jump aboard on 5,000 so now we're at 3-2 at that. I'll point out that my Belmont lot, which is a quote standard size lot, is not 6,000 square feet, it's a little less, and there are a whole bunch of them that are just a little less than 6,000 square feet. I mean,
Still compliant.
well, yes, but the point is, oh, they're all no, a lot of them are between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet.
All right, I think the vote is to go with staff's
All
recommendation.
right, fine.
Section 2.2.4.A2. And to whom does that one belong?
That might have been me. I didn't write it like that, but we'll go with it. Also, that's Preservation Piedmont's suggestion for a preservation bonus for RC. I would add, the last time we had this discussion back in whenever that was, whenever we talked about Module 1 the first time, so March, we had kind of talked about how it's not as great of an incentive to add a unit or two as your preservation bonus, and it won't motivate anyone, so why bother? And that's why we landed on, we discussed maybe not even putting it in B, but the consolidated draft added it in B. I would say the better argument is that you have areas in the city that are designated RC where the existing house is very valuable, and pretty much under no circumstances will it be viable to demolish it. So you're effectively reducing the allowance in those areas by 1 because that house is already there, and so pushing the pressure to those other areas with the cheaper houses that are more likely to be demolished. It seems like a pretty easy and simple thing to do to disincentivize demolitions.
So you're talking 8, 10, and 12. 8 base, 10 with the preservation bonus, and 12 with the portable.
Yep, and the preservation bonus is the only change.
Any issues? Okay. We're on to 2.2.4.A.4.
Is that me too?
Probably.
Statistically.
It's one I made like 6 months ago, so I'm going to say yes, that is me. There are places with outstanding covenants that may or may not still be valid that specify a setback range, and if you require a setback range that is not consistent with a covenant's range, you have a scenario where to build something you have to either violate your covenant or violate your violate the zoning code, and so you couldn't build anything one way or the other. Or at least, well, not without getting sued by your neighbors. Also, I think there are lots of circumstances where you might just want to, proceed with the existing setback range just to be in line with the neighbors. I mean, we've heard from the folks on Rugby Avenue about sawtooth development. I don't see any problem with allowing people to be set back further from the street if things already are.
Yeah. I think this helps with preservation as well. I mean, if there's a existing house on the site, you don't want to fully develop the whole site, but just add an ADU in the back, you're not forced to put something up front.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about the sore thumb issue that's been discussed. And originally I thought it was a height issue. It's not a height issue, it's a setback issue.
Mhm.
It's a sideways thumb. And I believe this addresses that issue.
Right, we are now on to 2.2.4.B1.
That sounds like a Lyle thing. Maybe a Phil thing?
Oh, that's me.
Mhm.
As you may recollect, the best affordable homeownership tool that I'm aware of is a stacked 2/2 townhouse. As we've seen from our financial analysis, townhouses make the most sense. I asked them to look at stacked 2/2 townhouses, but they didn't. But I'm still pretty sure it's right. My understanding is it's the best thing we can do. The current code bans it in all residential areas. I think that if we want to do the thing that we say we want to do, we should find a way to do it. So my thinking is allow it for affordable.
So just for me,
Yes.
Give me an example of a lot in the, give me a lot in this neighborhood in the city where this would apply.
So this would actually work.
And you want to go from 35 to 45, you want to go from 3 to 4?
Yes.
Chris? Okay.
For affordable, so this would just be any RC. So this would be generally near parks or schools, say like near, like, off the top of my head, can I name a school? Oh my God.
Johnson Village.
That's a very good
Johnson.
school. Right next to Johnson, it would allow affordable homeownership right there, right next to it.
All right, let's see what our colleagues in India think.
I mean, just an overall kind of relative concern, I think ultimately it's a policy decision, but we've made various statements about house scale, and I think the decision that has to be made is does 4 stories keep us within or take us out of a house scale? I've certainly heard arguments that present 4 stories as house scale. I've heard arguments that say the other ways. So, I don't have a strong perspective on this, but I wanted to note the issue and make sure it was part of the discussion.
I think 2/2 stacks are a significant piece of inventory and stock that can move the needle to, if anything, of one particular type can. I'm in agreement with Lyle, except that, of course, I would want to broaden it to the other ones as well. I also think that if we're calling it, is it, quote, house-sized, I understand that that is sort of a desirable aesthetic. It's also an extremely subjective one. And I think, that these 2/2s, for example, wouldn't, I don't think, be taller than C&O Row, which is really 3 stories for the most part above grade, plus your plus.
I checked, they're 3.25.
They're 3.25. Thank you. So, we've got a row of houses that everyone would say were house-sized, and they're right in the middle of downtown next to the railroad track. I don't see why we wouldn't. So, yes, for C, but I'd also argue, why not for A and B too? But I have a feeling I'm not going to win that one.
So I have kind of 2 sort of separate things to say about this. One is that I think stacked townhomes are very correctly the best way to get to affordable homeownership. The Habitat units we saw in Flint Hill are an example of that. Otherwise, you would have to go up to Brook Hill in the county to see them, because we probably don't allow them. I think where I get concerned about 4 stories is the idea of apartments that are 4 stories and not stacked townhomes. If we could write it in a way where they had to be built under the residential code or something, I'd be more comfortable with it. When you get to 4-story apartments, that's where you get to really outside of house scale. I will say one way, my other thing is, one way to maybe to square this circle is to allow 3.5 stories rather than 4, within the same height or within a 38-foot height maybe with 3 foot. If you look up, there are many places in the city with 3.5-story houses. This is St. Charles Avenue, just south of the bypass. Those houses are houses. They look like houses. They are literally houses. They're fine. They're perfectly fine. A 3.5-story in a townhouse format would look something like Cherry Hill, also over by Johnson Elementary. They are also fine. I think you could do that without just increasing the story limit, without increasing the height, or maybe a couple bits of height increase. I don't even think you necessarily need to do it with condition on affordability, because you're not increasing the height. And then you could do a 1.5-story over 2 stacked townhouse, or if the topography permits, potentially a 2/2, like Flint Hill did.
So what do you think about that caveat? His worry is that these become apartments, and he wants to avoid the apartment concept. Just these would be stacked houses. You cool with our colleagues in NDS crafting some language to prevent?
Yes, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
My
Mr.
concern
Schwartz.
is homeownership.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, you could do a 2/2 in the RX, right, or any of the others.
Yeah, I think you get an RX.
With an
the-
affordability bonus.
Right, which
Yeah.
is, I think this needs to be with the affordability bonus if we allow it in R3. I don't think you should allow it as a base, which I think is the next item that's coming up. If you can craft some language that makes sense, but
That's
that seems weird and complicated.
Yeah, I'm concerned about trying to draft something that introduces elements of building code into the zoning ordinance, like straight up. I think that the more simpler solution is the 3.5 stories, and just go into that. But there is a differentiation. We have these two items, one of which is the notion of the 3.5 or 4 stories being the base condition in RC, and the other one being that 3.5 or 4 stories is only achievable with the affordability bonus. And we need to kind of differentiate between those two scenarios, base versus subject to bonus.
So I would submit that a lot of these 2/2s, we might be in a position of kneecapping ourselves for 80% and lower where some of these units will be, right? These 2/2s may not be 60 and lower AMI, but a lot of them may be 80 and lower. And
In terms of just their, I'll call it natural state, market state.
yeah, and that we may be acting against our interests if we're gonna make it purely based on affordability at 60%.
Yeah, that was the case at Brook Hill, that they were naturally selling at the price the county sets for 80% AMI, or actually underneath that, until the housing price, or market as a whole spiked during COVID, and now they're more. But you
Right.
can attain sort of natural affordability and
Yeah.
good
and
market conditions with
yes.
that sort of unit.
So I think, I understand the intention of the affordability to boost it, but I think that our definition of affordability for that purpose is act against our interest.
And Mrs. Soliates, you, all right, so Phil, what is our recommendation on this item?
My thinking is 2/2. I am not persuaded that 4 stories and 45 feet is anathema. But I do sense that folks on the commission feel otherwise and want to be lower than that. So I think it shouldn't be based on affordability. I think it's 2/2. It's fine, and I'd like to go call it 4 stories. In other words, but, I mean,
That isn't quite your recommendation, Mr. Soliates.
I'm not following the distinction. You're just saying remove the affordability bonus, just allow 4.
yeah, I'm essentially that if we're doing it on that if we had some way of pinning it to 80%, I'd look at that, but that's not what we're doing. So if not, we may be generating a more natural and the possibility of 80%, particularly with the land trust model and such.
James, could we, to do the stacked townhouses versus apartment thing, could we do it the same way that we did the building height, or sort of, in a sense, the opposite way, the way we did it in RA and RB, where we said up to 2 units, you get one thing, up to, or more than 2, you get another. And so you say, up to 2 units, you get 4 stories. No, it doesn't make sense.
No, but then.
Because then you're getting huge houses.
Then we don't have 2, yes.
Yeah,
and no
you
2 over
could
2.
say exactly 2 units, you get 4 stories. More or less, you get
How does that serve us, though?
fewer. That allows stacked townhomes specifically.
All right, Phil, land the plane. What is our recommendation regarding this item?
I think we go to, that we go to 4 stories, 2/2. I mean, I think that stands, and we punt the affordability requirement.
Mrs. Schwartz, you seem to have a little heartburn. on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really scared of height, personally, but I feel like we need to, give council something that council's gonna pass. The 3.5 stories makes me feel a lot better.
Well, are we not I mean, let's not negotiate against ourselves. If they want to punt it back, they can push it back.
I'm having some heartburn with it as well, which is interesting.
Okay.
I wouldn't think I would, but I am.
Okay.
Because I think we've heard so much from the people who live in those RC districts that are so, incredibly unhappy with the code. And this just seems like it's just making it that much, gonna make them that much less happy.
The thing that gives me heartburn about this is taking out the affordability piece. I mean, if we're gonna, I'm cool with 4 and 45, but only if there's a reason to do it. And the only reason I want to do that is if I get some affordable housing.
Right, so even if we could effectively be promoting NOAA at 80% with these units.
80% doesn't do anything for a lot of people in the city, unfortunately.
Sure, but I mean, this is something we get for free, right? It just automatically serving people in middle incomes, which I think does have value, but
I mean, the 80% number, I mean, the reason it's absent from the city is that there's no affordable number that works at 80% LTV to buy a house in the city of Charlottesville right now, period. I mean, you can do it, but you're housing burdened.
so in your proposal, how would we restrict it to 2/2s versus doing an 8-plex?
Well, the problem with that is that we would get into the design and building code to do it, to say, well,
Right, and I also would, I mean, I'm just kind of coming out from a practical perspective, what would be the argument that says that a lower density building can have fewer I'm sorry, that a lower density building can be taller than a higher density building? Like I get that we're trying to constrain it in a way to produce a particular outcome, but from a public policy perspective, what's my
I mean,
argument?
I think there is a real public policy purpose there if you consider aesthetics a valid use of public policy, which we are assuming for the purposes of implementing the zoning code. Because the sorts of buildings you would get out of a building code building versus a residential code building that are 4 stories with 2 stairwells are not house scaled. They're not going to appear house scaled.
what about limiting it to 4 units? That sort of takes care of, that would box you.
So 4 units, 2 units.
No, you limit it to 4 units. If you're going to go 4 stories, it's got to be 4 units. That makes it a 4/4. That makes it a 2/2. It's 4 units all the time.
It's two floors over 2 floors and 2 total units.
So I think, well,
No, what I'm saying is it's 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. That gets you from being the large house, that gets you from being the small one. If you're going to 40 feet and 4 floors, it's a 4 unit.
so I guess I agree with Carl. I think 4 floors
trying to-
is
I'm-
just
my-
too much for others that aren't me, who isn't worried about it, to swallow. I think.
Even if we mandated it was 4 units in that building.
Well, I mean, I think what we saw with the reaction to Module 1 is where we said, oh, well, if you're doing 100% affordable, you could do 4 stories. And a lot of people who had previously said, oh, well, I would support this new zoning code if it created affordability, that's what really matters, then said, oh my God, 4 stories in a residential neighborhood, my residential neighborhood, is crazy and unacceptable. And I think you're going to spark the same backlash. And I think this is a much more defensible policy when it's within the heights of the existing code, which is 35 stories, or 35 feet and 3.5 stories.
Well,
3.5 stories is kind of implicit.
I would privilege that argument more if the argument was to do it in RA, RB, and RC. We're doing this only in RC. We're going to be very limited in the numbers that are going to appear here and a limited number of lots. And although we must consider the public comment And we can't be enslaved by it, particularly when, you know, we are encountering things that might be not, you know, factually wrong, for example. We're not privileging those comments.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue we should make it 3.5 stories and 35 feet in all 3 zones, actually, but
I will,
because you're not changing the height, so what's the point? The only thing is you can have a half story in the attic, or you could have a roof anyway, you just couldn't put any habitable space in there. And then you get to do a 1.5/2, or on a lot with favorable topography, like Flint Hill, you could do a true 2/2. In
With a
either of those
walkout.
cases, they could both be for sale pretty easily. I mean, that seems like a pretty good compromise to me,
in all 3 zones.
in all 3.
Well, I think we're getting there with, that's coming up.
Okay, so Lyle, are you comfortable with that? With whether, are you comfortable?
Making 3.5 stories and 35 feet in all 3 zones?
Is that what that's what you're recommending? That's what you're recommending, is it not?
Yeah, and I mean, I could conceivably see an affordability bonus that gets you to 40 feet just to give more flexibility to our nonprofit developers or affordable developers, but
40 feet or 45 feet?
45 seems high to me.
Okay.
I can see it working on some sites with a 40 feet bonus. That can work. It is better than what we've got.
So,
But what they're suggesting, that this would be an RA, B, and C. You cool with that?
That allows more sites, which makes it
More
physically
likely.
possible in more places.
Let's get some advice from the experts.
On, what's the question?
RA, RB, RC, 35, 3.5 stories can go to
So it's not-
4
so
stories
at-
with affordability.
I mean, at 3.5 stories, I don't know what the height number we'd put at it, but we'd probably go higher than 35 feet.
I
as
think
an
we
upper
are
limit.
talking 40 feet.
40
Yeah.
feet, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the number would be, but it would be higher than 35.
So
Right.
there
And
are,
probably in the 40, just over 40 feet,
Yeah,
somewhere in
that's
there.
what these guys are comfortable with.
Yeah.
so, I mean, you can definitely fit 3.5 stories into 35 feet, right? Like, the ones that exist now, like the ones I showed you a picture of earlier, which are in RA, I might add, were built under the existing zoning at 35 feet. You just can't have particularly tall ceiling heights, which I definitely get and support the general idea of allowing more height than stories to get that flexibility, to get sort of more differentiated looking housing. But I think in this case, if you want to squeeze it in to make it 2/2, you can squeeze it in. And we can give the nonprofits flexibility while keeping the market rate housing within that height envelope that we specified.
All right, could you sum up what you think the consensus is? No, wait a minute, Carl has a point.
No, I'm just groaning as I'm thinking, but, I mean, I think that might, I'm trying to do the math in my head. I think that might work, but only on a purely flat site, and if you don't have any, you know, if your floor is set right at grade. So I guess, I mean, your argument is just that it would only work in certain conditions. I don't know, this question has morphed. I mean, I don't know where we are.
Well, let's see if we can settle on this, and we'll get to the next one, may help us. So maybe, Rory, if you could sum up where you think we are.
So I would suggest in all 3 zones, 3.5 stories, 35 feet. If you're affordable, you get 40 feet.
All right, cool.
And the basis for the affordable at 40 feet is literally just to carve out for certain people greater flexibility. Like, I'm not sure I can,
I mean, to Carl's point, it might not work on every site, right?
right.
And
But if it's affordable and we're trying to make this work, we're gonna make it work. If we need to go to 39 or 40 feet, yeah, I get that. And frankly, it
I
makes
just,
the
I
top.
don't, I'm looking for the connection between
Yeah.
affordability and like,
40 feet.
and 40 feet. Like,
Do we have to go to 4?
do affordable units typically appear taller? Just
I think
granting greater
it opens up,
flexibility
it
is-
opens up more sites for it to actually be feasible, right? Where you might have sites where it's not feasible at 35.
It might encourage somebody to go to 40. Yeah, it might encourage somebody to go to affordability to be able to build.
So the
their
public has
home.
to endure seeing 5 extra feet but they can be safe in the knowledge that there are affordable units on site. I don't know. I mean, I think if that's overly complicated, it's not strictly necessary.
I get it. I think, yeah, 35 is tight, 40 is much less tight, so put some affordability in there and build.
I was making myself so comfortable with the 2.5 and bonus up to 3 stories in the RA. I was trying real hard to get comfortable with that. And I think I actually succeeded. And now you guys are, you can go backwards on that.
I've never been comfortable with that. I mean, that to me is one of the most egregious things we're doing here is we're saying we want to allow a little bit more in a house scale building, and then we're saying a whole bunch of the actual houses that we have are illegal and not house scaled. Except that they are, as long as they have really tall ceilings and not inhabitable attic.
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially making a set of aesthetics decisions that have been made in the other direction by thousands of people.
I mean,
So I
thought-
think this whole, this gets us back to everyone's unhappy at 40 feet. Well, guess what? Most neighborhoods have them. And there are existing conditions on the ground at 3.5 stories right now. So, yeah. And heck, in my neighborhood like Belmont, look, the height of the building doesn't matter. It's the height of the land that, you know.
Well, I mean, and my issue with height was more of the foot height than story height in a lot of these things, because it just seemed like with topography, you're gonna end up having too many weird cases where the building's gonna be too tall just by its definition, or technically too tall versus actually too tall. Am I the only one that's struggling? Because if I am, we should move on.
I'm not struggling, but I think we ought to at least hear you out.
I mean, it does seem like staff is struggling with the complexity of it, right? We have a pretty straightforward building height up to 2 units, building height more than 2 units, and now that's adding a third variable into that equation.
Third, where?
Affordability.
The affordability, yeah. My struggle there is I'm just trying to draw the connection. And so I'm getting the notion that we're trying to, on a relatively undefinable, in a relatively undefinable pathway, say by doing this, we're opening up more lots to affordable units than to market rate units. My sense is pick a height, and that's the height for everybody. I don't know that we're gaining anything significant by granting the affordable units a little bit of extra height, but no additional stories, right? They're just getting flexibility that we're denying everybody else. Just because it's them, right? Like what? At the end of the day, zoning is meant to identify districts and then have uniform standards within those districts. So let's have districts and uniform standards within those districts. Uniform standards that's applying to the same type of thing, but we're not really supposed to be getting into ownership.
I think I would like to personally keep it at 2.5 with a bonus to 3 in RA and RB, and then look at RC for ways of increasing height. So maybe we do up to 3 or 3.5 or even 4 in the RC, but I am struggling with the RA and RB because I do think we're going to get
What if we made it
pushback on that.
3.5 in RA and RB, and then gave that extra height flexibility in RC?
I don't know what are we gonna get a bunch of, I guess they're not really, the building code requires, I think, 7.5 feet for habitable space. Are we gonna start seeing that, and is that gonna be a problem? That's what I'm trying to understand in my
I mean,
head.
you're still
Is that
talking
gonna be-
about 10 feet per story, including your floor system, right? So you can fit that with 9-foot ceilings.
No, if you wanna have ductwork and whatever, you probably need to use trusses. So it's about 18 inches for your floor system.
So 8.5-foot ceilings, I mean, that's not unlivable conditions there.
So that gets you we're saying 3 stories? Or we're saying 3.5, what are we saying?
3.5.
So that's 40 feet.
So the way that half story is measured, though, you're taking the midpoint of your angled roof.
Yeah. So I guess if that's working out perfect and if your building's not too wide. I mean, that's a 20-foot wide building to get a 10-foot tall roof. That's not actually gonna work. You're not gonna get, I'm thinking of the shape of the roof, the geometry of that doesn't give you much habitable space in there at 35 feet.
So if you were, Mr. Schwartz, if you were the king of zoning in Charlottesville, what compromise would you be able to articulate?
To focus on RC at the moment and go up to 3.5 or 4 stories with a proportionate increase in height.
That's pretty much what Mr. Yates is suggesting. So, yeah, you guys agree. Why do we take this on and get to this?
And tie that to affordability as well.
Tie it to affordability. Mr. Yates.
It's a great idea.
Mr. Duranzia?
I think we're making ourselves. I think we're making, if the point is to give us the height and the spread to get something approaching a 2/2 scenario, I think we've now done everything we can to make that as difficult as possible and going, well, we do it at 35 feet, we do that. You know, I mean, if we want to look at 2/2s, let's look at the space we need to build 2/2s and provide a zoning environment that will work in a significant number. And I think that trying to have a compromise based on people's impressions and idea, I mean, what's the math tell us what we can do and what we can't to get 2/2s?
Well, I think what we're saying is, or at least what I'm saying is, if you want to do an affordable 2/2, you can put it in the RC.
Right.
But
Right,
I think I'm precluding it from RA and RB, and I don't know if that's the right answer, but at the point, that's, I think,
Yeah, and
comfortable.
again, that is what Mr. Yates was attempting to do as well.
Although I think that if he could find consensus to do it in RA and RB, he'd be all over it, although I don't want to put
No.
words in his mouth.
The unit count doesn't support, does the unit count support 2/2 in the RA? I mean, at the end of the day, you get 3 units.
If you're doing it, then you got to go 4 units. You're doing an affordable unit in there anyway. So that sort of solves that problem. If you do a 2/2, it's got to be.
Ms.
You gotta-
Creasy?
You have to keep the existing structure to get 4 in RA.
You gotta
Or
keep-
do affordable
Or do an
units, right?
affordable unit.
So
Or
you-
all affordable.
You could have three 2/2s next to each other, 6 total units if they're affordable. It's conceivably possible in RA.
I know it's not perfect, but it also would allow 3/1s. 2/1.
2/1s.
Sorry, yes,
Or-
2/1s.
Right.
Which should be allowed anyway. Right now.
Right,
Yep.
but I mean, that's also probably a semi-naturally affordable type of unit type.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we've been on this for almost 25 minutes. The consensus seems to be that we restrict this to RC, but there is some bleeding over.
I think you're the swing vote.
I would restrict it to RC.
That might solve this.
I'm not going to oppose it, but I do still have heartburn over anything that increases that height in feet. I don't see a strong public need for that height in stories in these zones. I would be okay with striking the height in stories for more than 2 units entirely and letting people fit in what they can fit in. But I certainly wouldn't oppose increasing it in RC, but I don't know that that's going to fly by council.
Well, again, they've got the option to kick it back. I think I see 3 votes that would support it, but, okay.
So we're accepting what's written in red on that section, is that correct?
Wait a minute, we've got.
Or RC.
Correct, so I'm looking at section 2.2.4.
That is my proposal.
Yeah.
And we're accepting the thing that's underlined in red. Okay.
Can you live with that?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make sure I know what we've just put it on.
You got a heartburn, but you don't think it'll fly with.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem there, I think, is it still gets you back to, you could build a 16-unit building with 4 units affordable. No, you can't build a 16-unit building, never mind.
No, you would not be.
A 12
Right, 12.
with 4 affordable, 3 on each floor. I mean, I don't know why you would, but
Mhm.
you could, I guess. I guess you could do it so you could use most of the first floor for parking.
All right,
I
I
don't
think we've landed on, this only being an RC and, in the area highlighted in red by Mr.
So
Solis.
only an RC and only with the affordability, because you got to push.
That would be my hope.
Because the next one is basically offering.
Yeah, so that'll help
4
us.
stories without the affordability.
Whose is that yours? That's not yours? Is that, Mr. Hobbs?
Well, we've discussed, I mean, I
I
feel
think
like
we-
this is.
I think we've discussed both of these.
Oh, yes, cancel, so move on.
Yeah.
Page 2.
So then we get to the top of page 2, and this is 3 stories as the base height in RA and RB. So this is increasing from the existing 2.5 to allow up to 3.
And currently, we're tying that to, it's not an affordability bonus, it's just if you have 2 more units.
This is just the base, right?
Right, but it, we were
Oh,
allowing.
right, the current is tying it to the affordability, and which is kind of the next item, right? Where we had,
Current is tying it to the number of units.
Yeah, it's tying it to the number of units.
yes, thank you.
All right.
Sorry, yeah.
Just, sorry.
So where are we? Are we on the second item on page 2 now?
No, I mean,
So I think we
We-
probably discussed them together, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Do we consolidate all of those into the more than 2 units amount? Do we leave it like it is, or do we allow duplexes and higher to have that 3rd story?
What is your recommendation?
It's a policy decision, I'm not,
He's officially agnostic.
So I proposed the second one here. I think there was public comment about this in the hearing. I think it does make sense to allow that 3rd story, it's the extra half story for a duplex, to encourage smaller footprints, which means more open space. I would recommend keeping the limit for single units, under the theory that, this encourages smaller, more affordable houses and less tear downs and McMansions.
Could you mind netting that out in a way that staff can?
Yeah, so basically the proposal in red here.
I think it's
James,
following this
James
one.
got it, yeah,
Oh, I
got
see.
it, thank you. Okay, we're good. Everybody cool?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, next one.
So we approved the second
Oh.
one, not the first one?
Yeah.
Did you propose the first one? No one's voted in favor of it.
I think that.
This one was me, and it's, again, it's me fussing over, if you have a 2-story house with a walkout basement, you're gonna run into some issues, or if you have I know staff says it doesn't preclude flat roofs, but I'm thinking of a 2-story house with a roof deck and a, 3rd floor pop-up, which technically would be the half story. That pop-up could potentially have a wall that's, more than, what's allowed, 25 feet. So it just,
Wouldn't,
I don't need to push this too hard. It just seems like we're constraining ourselves, and I'd like a little more wiggle room in that sidewall height if we could get it.
by pop-up, you mean like the stairs to get up there? Wouldn't
Yeah,
that
or if
be
you have,
the
like,
like
if you
height
just use-
encroachment, vertical appurtenance, vertical circulation appurtenance?
Well, I'm thinking like maybe you've got a stair and you've got a little living room up there. But it's not more than 50% of your floor area. So I think there's a couple, I think if you look from the Belmont Bridge, there's a couple of houses in Belmont that have done that recently.
Mhm.
And it just, again, I don't want to drag this out, but it does seem like it's, I don't know, as an architect, it frustrates me.
see, I mean, you understand what the intention
Yeah.
is to address, it's kind of neighbor compatibility
Mhm.
to a certain extent, and I've seen ordinances try and tackle this in a lot of different ways. What I like about this way is it's relatively simple.
Mhm.
Denver has got this whole, I forget what they call it, grade plane, I think is what they call it, or something like that. Roof plane, I think is what they call it. And they actually like impose an angle on every
Mhm.
single lot. in order to- And you're doing all of this
Mhm.
amazing geometry in order to regulate.
Yeah,
and
figure
in
out
most cases,
junior can have an
single-family homes
yeah,
next to
right.
each other.
Right.
Cigarette zoning.
Right.
What happens if someone has like a dormer and the face of the dormer comes out to the face of the wall? I mean, is that also,
Does that
would you guys ever work
typically
that?
happen? Yeah,
Sometimes.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll let it go. I mean, I'd like, personally, I'd like to see a couple more feet added in there so that like the diagram that I sent you guys, that actually wasn't that big of a house. I mean, it is because it's 2.5 stories with a full basement, but still is like 3,200 square feet. And the fact that like that sidewall was still gonna be too much.
Yeah, and I think in the response to that email, there was a suggestion of increasing it.
I mean, a couple
If
feet I
that
think
was-
would help.
Yeah. Let me see.
I remember she offered potentially decreasing the transparency, but
Right. No, she said we could go to 35 overall height and 28 sidewall height, and still keep 2.5 stories.
I mean, I would like to see that for the flexibility, because we're restraining it to 2.5 stories. So we're technically not allowing anything that's massive, but it does give you some more flexibility for weird topography. And it seems like the residential districts we have are where all the weird topography is.
I think there is value in the flexibility, actually.
Right, so the suggestion that came from with me being the go-between, an exchange between Carl and Christie suggested 35 feet at 2.5 stories and 28 on the sidewall.
You good with that?
That would make me happier.
Are you good with that?
I defer to the
Wait, what?
architect.
Me too. All right, cool. All right, the next one, remove build to requirements in residential districts. Who's with that?
That's probably me again. Yeah, it just seems like if someone is building a single house on a residential lot, you should just be allowed to have more freedom. So like, if the rules could apply to if you have 2 or more dwellings on a lot, that makes sense to me. But if it's just one dwelling, it just feels like there should be some more freedom to, set the house further back if you wanted to. Or, we're on.
The, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th one down. Yes,
Time on
build two requirements.
Next time I'll remember these.
I don't want to read about A, B, C, blah. Hey,
Not super important, but
So what I've got now as a proposal is to exempt a single unit building from this requirement.
I like that.
cool, that works.
I thought that was a different one, but,
I did see that somewhere else. but-
should we say, and then staff's response was that you're worried about townhouses with garages, so should we say
Different
detached
items.
single unit or something?
That's a
fine.
I think
different
he's
item.
moved down, hasn't he? You.
Oh, yeah, this is, I guess I don't understand how these are different. Well, I guess the active depth requirement disappears. if you
Right
don't
now,
have a
we're
built-to,
on,
or-
We're in the middle of the page.
remove the build to requirement in residential districts.
Yeah,
So,
or,
That
when you
is
say
a
you
good
have.
point, because the active depth requirement is tied back to the build
Oh,
to width.
yeah.
We'll say these 3.5-story St. Charles houses very much do not satisfy the active depth requirement.
Yeah, I noticed that. You've got garages right there. Which I
With
think
some of
have
these, I
four.
mean, are we chasing, do we have solutions here that are running around in search of problems?
I if there's a way, I mean, there are ways to get variances of this, obviously. If that's not too complicated, I will let this rest. It just seemed like it's something that bothered me.
I think James has a thought, so let's hear it.
No, I was just gonna say, if there's interest in having a conversation, I heard the solutions seeking problems. And again, I just want to note that as we're presenting a gradual increase in density over time in these neighborhoods, we are going to care more and more about how these buildings interface with the street. And that's the issue that I'm trying to address. And you
Yeah.
can't draw the line and say, well, once 4 houses do it, now it's a problem and everybody else. It's kind of one of those things where you make the rule and it applies to everyone, because that's how zoning works.
I'll back down.
Yeah, I think regardless of density, these form standards are creating a more walkable environment, even if they are detached houses on these lots. with
Okay,
these
so
removals,
you're
so-
with as it is now, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll back down.
Right, increase the allowed height for 2.5 stories to XXX and 3 to 40 feet.
Well, I think we kind of talked about this
Yeah.
just a second ago. We
Yep.
talked about 2.5 to 35.
Yep,
So if we kind of fill in that blank now,
we're good.
well, and then the question is 3 stories to 40.
Okay,
Why?
So if you note,
that's,
Carl?
I can't draw the picture in my head at the moment. Ask Christie if that's enough to put a sloped roof on a 3-story building.
okay, hold on. I'm just going to have to write that down.
I know, I just think that's.
I mean, the roof pitch measurements for height don't change how we're doing it now, right? So there's no reason, if we're able to do it now, there's no reason that shouldn't work under these new rules, which are the same. We currently measure at the midway point.
Right.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering how closely that measurement gets checked in the permit office.
Well,
There were
more
some,
closely now.
There were some townhouses in Crozet that were built 3 feet over spec, and it's a whole thing.
You try not to regulate Crozet.
good luck with that.
And that wasn't meant to be a dig at the permit office, that was just that it's, you got a 2-story house or a 3-story building, and it's got a sloped roof, and I would imagine that there's more important things to look at than where the midpoint of the roof is.
So, I mean, for the purposes of so, I don't know, you've got the language in front of you in terms of how the measurement is taken, or do you want?
Oh, for,
to look at it?
no, I mean, yeah, it's the midpoint of the roof, right? Is that?
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right,
Um,
where there's a pitch greater than 412.
so-
I guess I don't understand how
Yeah, I
this.
think 40 feet is, I mean, I don't know.
You mean 40 feet is what?
That would be a 20-foot roof if you have 10-foot floors. Let's say you have 12-foot floors, so you're 36 feet. Yeah, well, I guess I see how that would do it, yeah.
I mean, what did we proportionally increase? We increased 2.5 stories from, what was it originally? Sorry, I can probably.
Actually, it's right there, 32 to 35.
All right, so should 3 stories be 43?
I guess I just don't see. I mean, we're living in a world right now where with a flat 35-foot height limit, and people are fitting 3.5-story buildings in. So, I mean, I guess the height measurement methodology has changed to an extent here, right? Is it severely limiting compared to the current height methodology? Otherwise, I don't see what the problem is.
I didn't think this went through far enough. I mean, I wasn't even, I thought we dealt with this already on the other sections. Well, okay.
What would you like to do?
I I don't think this was even mine, but,
Oh.
Sounds like you.
it does sound like me.
It's gotta be recurring.
But I mean, I think, so if we increase 2.5 stories from 32 to 35, I think it would make sense to just add the extra 3 feet to anything that's 3 stories, so up to 43.
So 3 stories is up to 43 is what you like.
So the proposal was to increase from three stories to
40.
Okay, well, or leave that. I mean, if
That's good.
that's what the proposal was.
In
Yeah, because
the-
it's 35 right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so 3 stories to 40 feet. You good with that?
Sure, yeah.
So the XX now reads 35.
Right. and
Yeah,
so we're
I'm
gonna-
fine.
Okay.
That still seems excessive to me, and I don't see the need to go above the current limits, but I guess I'm in the minority here, the minority I very much did not expect to be in,
All right, the
but
next one reads like Bill. I'm pretty sure that's you.
This
I'm
is
not
me.
Bill, Carl.
This is me. So I think one thing that would help is if an opaque front door can count towards your transparency requirements.
We also threw out the number of 20%. Does 20% solve it?
That actually makes me feel a lot better as well.
Right, so it would be 20% on the ground story and 10 above.
Perfect.
Yeah.
that sounds good to me.
I mean, you guys are all. Okay
That was
with
quick. All right.
Well,
On the page-
I've got one concern. Does this kill passive house? Can we still do passive house at 20%?
Would you say that again?
Can we still do passive house at 20%?
Patrick?
Passive house.
Passive.
Passive.
That's a really good question.
Thank you. And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that my
will-
house was 11% really surprised me.
Yeah.
Really?
13.
Does
I remember
active
you
solar shading count against you for transparency?
No.
And I assume that's what passive house is requiring, right? Not a blanket? I mean, I haven't read the standards.
It's been a while.
The idea with passive house is you have heavily insulated windows. The cost of heavily insulated windows drives you to small windows. It's not that you can't do larger windows with passive house, it's that you pay for them. But also, anyone doing a single-family passive house is probably already paying.
And you're saving on electricity bills, so got that going for you.
Let's see if that becomes an issue.
They can ask for a special exception
They can.
if we do that later.
20%.
Objection rescinded.
Are we good? All right. Restore the height bonus affordable housing down to mixed use. That sounds like either Rory or Lau.
That would be me. There's some big parking lots behind my building that I think should be 100 stories. Maybe a slight exaggeration, but I don't know why we removed it. We do have this new requirement now that BAR can sort of set height limits, but it's unclear to me whether they can go up or
They can-
down.
They can only go down.
They can only go
The
down, in which
language is
case.
in there
we
that
just have-
indicates that is clearly stated in the
Okay.
language.
Oh, okay.
Because I missed that
It's-
as well.
I might have missed that, yeah.
It's in there. I
So-
confirmed it as I was doing all this. So we
Wait a minute, don't we later talk about deleting that in its entirety?
deleted one in its
That
entirety.
BAR can't be in the business of reducing height for the purposes?
That's one of the issues
Yeah.
that's been raised, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we get to
But-
that, we
yeah,
can talk
we
about
can
it.
get
But,
to that. But the bigger question is, and we don't really have an issue
with the
go-
affordable house.
with the
Yeah,
affordable-
I mean,
going
I'd say
up to
match
12, yeah.
NX10. Yes, they're a place on the downtown mall. Maybe it won't work. BAR can argue about that, or we can discuss how to deal with those. Big parking lots that aren't on the mall, lots of places that aren't on the mall that are in DX should probably have more density even than NX10 places have. It seems crazy to me to allow less. It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree. Affordable housing bonus.
Okay, cool. All right, 2.8.5.
This is my mess. Getting rid of or allowing fences, I think, is helpful. What else do you say? The height change also with the 14-foot minimum height and then capping the overall height, it seemed like it was too constrained. So if there was a way to add some flexibility in there, if you're gonna have a 14-foot minimum ceiling or floor to floor on the ground floor, but then keep it at 25 feet, just seemed.
Sure. So in our
Stuck.
notes there, we suggest the height change and fences reasonable changes. I think where,
I'm good with that.
okay.
Okay. 2.9.2B.
Oh, staff's recommendation.
Yeah, and
Thank
so,
you.
just to understand, we just copied over what's in the
understood.
existing?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Because I raised the exact same issue when I read it, but I also don't mind changing it. We were just trying to not make changes within the
Yeah,
ABC
no, that-
districts. This is a change with no substance, but
Mr. Stolzenberg.
I don't see a staff recommendation here. What's staff recommendation?
Oh,
the text, the red text.
Yeah,
Oh.
there was every district had a different way of describing what's contributing, what's not.
Well, that's because some of them are maps and some of them are literally every building.
Well,
And I thought there were some that were like, yeah, only some new buildings. I mean, it is ridiculous, but,
it's been fixed. It's been fixed.
okay, but then city council needs to go designate some maps along
No,
with
there's
this,
a map
right?
for everyone.
There is a.
There
for
is.
everyone.
Mhm.
Okay.
The maps need to be updated, but that's a different thing.
All right, we're good. 2.10.4.c, don't require outdoor amenity space. I don't understand.
Oh, okay, that again was mean, it was just it's important as a tool for modulating the ground, as the building facade.
Yeah.
It just seems odd as a requirement that you have to have this like recreation space used by the building. That's where I was coming
Yeah.
from.
I heard the argument.
Yeah.
I understood where you were going with that argument. I think though where it comes into play most significantly is gonna be on the larger sites, and at that point, I think there should be some space for a recreational, recreational space,
Mhm.
breathing room, what have you. And that's what it comes down to. But it is also a tool for breaking up the massing. And remember, if the calculation comes in under 400 square feet, like if the calculation for the amount of required amenity space comes in at 400
Mhm.
or less, it's waived.
Mhm.
But 400 or less is a very small lot. That's like the clock shop, the Waterbird
Well, it
distillery.
depends on the percentage, right?
Sure,
In
but
downtown,
usually it's
it's-
10%.
Yeah.
I could see just keeping it with the breaking up requirement in that it gets you that block bonus thing, but I don't see how a rooftop deck does anything for the public. And if it's just breathing room for residents, I don't know why we're
Well,
encouraging
remember,
them to.
you basically get a bonus if you make it accessible to the public. So your requirement is halved if it's,
Sure. In which case, I think we should, well, these are waivable with this special exception, right? Because they're in the.
yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's fine. Because Violet Crown could not do this, right?
Yeah, and you can also use this space to meet your build to requirement.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we're good.
So it is, and saying that, what I'm saying is that also is then for a tool for flexibility. Right?
Yeah.
Because you can use this space.
That's true.
To meet that build to requirement.
All right,
I would, sorry,
Okay.
I had I'd been reading my module one notes from a long time ago now. Oh, wait, sorry, no, I think this is fixed. You're allowed to roof them, right? So like an
certain
arcade or a
percentage.
portico would count?
It's a percentage, yeah, that can be roofed.
I think it's like 50%. It was something
Well,
quite
we'd have to
large,
look
I
at it.
thought.
What's the,
let's look.
we can come back to this.
No, this is good, this, I don't want to come back, so let's resolve it and move on that once we move on. Let's move on once we have resolved it.
If somebody beats me to it, you're welcome to say so.
Outdoor amenity space that is roofed must have a minimum clear height of 15 feet. Then it says fully enclosed accessory structures and roofed accessory structures can cover a cumulative area no greater than 25%. So that, a roofed accessory structure to me would not include like a portico, right? Like, so I'm thinking of the old Albemarle Hotel over by Higher Education on West Main, that nice pedestrian space they have out front. That would qualify under those rules, right, under the new consolidated draft, right?
And that's saying it has to have a ceiling of 15 feet?
That's true, which it probably
So
doesn't,
it's-
but
I mean, it might. Probably doesn't.
probably would now because it wouldn't be allowed to have stairs for ADA, but I think
Tell me.
when I actually read through this, I was okay with it, the change, so it's fine.
All right.
The next one,
Trees.
staff's recommendation, if the administrator can approve tree grades, then I would have no problem.
Okay.
My read of the language was that's within the realm of what the administrator can approve.
Okay. And now on to this wonderful table.
Yeah,
Whose
it
was
seemed,
this?
this was me again, it just seemed kind of funny to require a setback from an alley. So I recommended reducing everything to 0 and,
So the,
but,
yeah, I'm sorry, so the one issue is that oftentimes with the older alleys, they're paved end to end, and the entire right of way, and it just, so what is identified here is kind of essentially, this is an encroachment table, right? It's allowing, it's how far you're allowed to encroach into setback. And it's still requiring a minimum of 2 to 1.5 feet, just to make sure there's a little bit of space for something coming down the alley.
I'm not gonna fight that one hard. If that's the best practice, then okay.
Right, top of page 6. Kind of sounds like you two.
Footings.
Looked like this has been fixed, so,
Okay.
yeah, just because I'm OCD and,
All right, 2.10.6.8.2. Apply through all, it's you two, isn't it?
that is me, and, it looks like they have, fixed it.
We've suggested it. This
Sorry.
is a big this is a big decision in some respects because what it's basically saying that an exception we created for residential districts would apply to
Yeah.
all districts.
So I think this works because it's may waive, right? Like, it works for 1709 JPA that we saw the other day, because it makes sense for that to address JPA.
Right.
It wouldn't work for the Quirk Hotel, where it should be presenting a reasonable frontage on Commerce Street.
And I'm thinking mostly of Salvation Army being
That's not a good one, yeah.
Okay. All right,
This one's mine. Designated heritage tree is actually only one of 4 types of designated trees. The Salvation Army one, I'm pretty sure, is not designated anyway. This just lets you save trees instead of tearing them down to build a building close to it.
that works for me.
We would, I threw in language, it says 15 inches diameter. I would actually make that match what our actual measurement standard is for trees, but I just threw this in.
Yeah, that's fine.
Diameter at breast height.
Yeah, DBA, yeah.
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant.
All right, so we have a conflict. Where is the conflict in the next one?
This one is the one we resolved, in that it's just a mislabeling of the section. We were talking about this before the meeting.
Okay. Want to add a new section? Whose is that?
So, I'm guessing this is Carl's, but I had a similar one that, or maybe it is mine, because I had a similar
Yeah,
I
one.
don't think it's me.
Sorry,
What
I
did
didn't
you-
put
what did you
enough
wanna do?
context in
This
there.
is the
Maybe it's
one
Portman,
where
too.
the allowed height in the building is changes based on the number of units in the building. Those rules are a little bit unclear to me, of like, for example, what is a building? I mean, I think, if I were to suggest this, there is a whole section that goes into what that means, but then it says, it defines it as a structure, and what is a structure exactly? My view is that, townhouses, 3 townhouses together, the triplex, side-by-side triplex, should count as one building for that purpose?
I think it does, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, you think it does because that's your interpretation of it, or because the text is clear?
Because it's my interpretation.
Okay.
I mean, what I understand is that with the exception that's being granted, if you've got more units, you can get a greater height, basically, right?
Yeah.
Is clearly, in my mind, is clearly not intended to apply to a group of cottages on sublots.
Right.
Right.
But then conversely, for footprint, I would suggest that townhouses should count separately, because the idea is to make smaller scaled, smaller appearing in scale buildings. Whereas if you had a row of townhouses, that appears as separate buildings. But, so fits the intent of the footprint section. But it's unclear what that would.
All right, I didn't look at the footprint section, so. Sure.
So you're saying townhouses should not be allowed to have the additional height?
They should be allowed to have the additional height.
Okay.
The, I mean, it's just an it's just a unit count. I mean, just, not reading the detail language, I look at the coverage issue. You get more footprint. So what's your argument that townhouses shouldn't gain access to that greater footprint if they meet the unit count?
It's a footprint limit.
Yeah. Yes, it's a max, right, understood.
Yeah, so would a whole townhouse block be subject to the max, or would an individual townhouse be subject to the max?
All in the same lot, it's considered one building. I don't understand.
Well, so the footprint is separate from lot coverage, right?
Okay, I'm
Lot
sorry,
coverage is all the units in a lot, and then footprint is an individual structure. I'm also, do you have the section?
I just opened to a random page that happened to have the issue.
Fair enough, which page?
I opened to RC 224-2-10, section 224.
Okay, I'm on totally wrong section then. That's under rules for zoning districts, isn't it? Yeah.
I didn't go to the rules for zoning
There
districts.
we go, yeah, coverage. So, each building or covered structure in a lot cannot have an area in excess of the maximum building footprint
Right,
allowed by the zoning district.
right.
Building footprint is measured for each individual building or structure.
Yes.
Is a townhouse one building or multiple buildings, a set of townhouses?
For zoning purposes, I believe I would interpret it as one building.
All right.
But I can
And
also
so then we
check-
would be
I can make
saying-
sure I can double check that. I'll double check that
A
interpretation.
3,000 square foot footprint, if you're building in 3 units in RA next to each other and attached,
Mhm.
you have 1,000 square foot footprint for each, which is, they're 20 feet wide, 50 feet deep.
60 by 50, the whole thing.
I guess that's not totally unreasonable.
All right, I'll raise the question.
Okay.
All right,
This was me, and it, just clarifying that the top of the roof is for a flat roof, is the structural roof deck, and not the top of the insulation or the membrane.
yeah.
Fixed.
Page 7. Wait, no, it's, yeah,
Eight.
page 7.
Let's see.
Vertical circulation, again, that's me. If you have an elevator overrun, it's gonna need to be more than 10 feet. Now, I understand that you could also just make the building shorter, and then that encroachment can extend as high as it needs to, but, I wanna throw that out there in case anybody feels strongly that we should allow someone to maximize their height plus have an elevator overrun.
Is this something anyone would be able to see?
See it on top of the Monticello Hotel. Any tall building around town that has an elevator, there'll be a little pop-up.
Oh, good,
So elevators don't fit in 10 feet, is that the issue?
right.
Right, if they have to access the roof, they do not.
Okay, that seems fair then.
Yep.
All right, this one looks like you as well, Mr.
Yeah, it looks like staff's recommending no change. Again, it's just that if you have an unenclosed structure, like if you have a rooftop little trellis or something, or I don't know, like a little covered area, 8 feet isn't gonna give you much ceiling height. But again, they can lower the building and just let that thing be as tall as it wants to be, so it's not a big deal to me, just, again, 8 feet's not enough for a enclosed structure, if you're maxing out your building height.
Unenclosed, like a pergola on your roof then?
Yeah.
Any
I think
thoughts
you
about,
had suggested 10 feet.
Did I? Yeah, which,
does that work for you, Mr.?
This really doesn't.
You don't care?
This is gonna be one of the issues. This isn't a big one for me.
Okay, so 10 feet.
Someone's gonna try and maximize.
Should really
the
tall,
building.
tall
Yeah,
people have to
just-
bash their
just
head on
do.
their rooftop pergola?
So,
is the
Mr.
question.
Schwartz, you.
There are a lot of 8-foot tall people.
10 feet.
I'm sure there's a few.
Yeah, the 10 feet, that makes me happier. The next one I think is also me.
So I want to make sure we got staff on board, so
Oh, sorry.
8 to go from 8 to 10 feet on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've talked around this one,
Sorry,
limiting
yes.
the active depth requirements, and I'm okay just forgetting about it. But that was,
So you're comfortable
we have
as,
sort of, I'm comfortable with,
as is.
I mean, I don't think I'm gonna persuade any of you guys since we have kind of talked around this already.
Right. Public art.
Me again being picky, that just make sure that a mural is actually a mural and not, someone just painting another
Graffiti.
color on the wall. So, and staff's recommended, text
No
change, not recommended,
abstract art
staff's,
It's
murals.
called art.
yes. Well, I don't know if someone just. colored
Just
blocks.
call it a
It's like,
blanco
this
and
is
said,
my-
look, yeah.
My, how I'm satisfying my blank wall requirements.
It's,
So
yeah,
they'll
it's,
have to paint it a different color than the rest of the wall,
yeah,
and
it's
then it'll
not,
be
this is,
sufficiently different.
So you're comfortable.
this is a
with-
Blinko
I'm
print,
comfortable
doesn't
with
matter.
The text change that's been proposed.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're talking about, delete planter option. Planter option, what's,
Oh, yeah.
I should have offered some more context on this one, I apologize. So this is where you have a blank wall in the foundation wall space, and one of the options for masking that blank wall is a planter. And, I don't know, Carl, I'll let you.
Yeah,
is a blank wall a bad thing?
no, so the planter, the way it was done
It is?
was, the planter has to be 4 feet high or more, I think.
No, maximum, 4 feet was the maximum.
What
I
am I
could-
thinking? Something was funny in here.
No, you mentioned 4 feet in your comment, definitely.
So you have foundation planting, which you could technically set that on a planter. So the height above the sidewalk minimum is 4 feet for a planter. So that
Oh,
seemed
right,
to
you're
me
right,
like
it was a minimum, yeah.
you're making a
Sorry.
blank wall again that's already,
So the planter is 4 feet, or the plantings are 4
the
feet?
planter height above the sidewalk.
I could see
Oh.
making the plantings 4 feet to,
Well, the illustration clearly shows it's the planter itself, so,
yeah,
but in any event.
So what would you like that to?
Well, I'm wondering, is that even necessary when we have the planted, foundation planting?
Call a low planter a foundation planting,
Well,
that's a
Yeah,
low
As
planter.
long as it's not more than 4 feet tall, I think you're okay.
But the foundation planting is in the ground,
Doesn't
is
specify,
the
does
issue,
it?
right? Maybe?
It doesn't specify it.
Yeah, okay.
So what would you like to do with that?
Either fix the planter section so that it's a maximum of 4 feet, or just allow it to be covered under foundation planting.
Which would you rather?
Allow it to be covered under foundation planting.
Just remove it.
What is
Yeah.
it? Okay, all right.
Just keep it, fewer things seems simpler to me.
Okay.
Mhm.
Street facing entrances. It sounds like.
Yeah, it just that, you could have a house that, the front door is off to the side, even though it's got a front porch.
We have many.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you got the windows, you've got the transparency, and as long as the front door is accessed from the street,
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like has to be facing the front street,
That seems
Hmm.
all right. with
or
me.
the, facing the street.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a bunch of narrow lots like that.
21013B.
Yes, so looking through the entry feature standards, and James, please correct me if I misread this, but it seemed like they all could just be a covered entry, or covered under the section that says covered entry. And so,
Hold on, I gotta refer back to
okay.
other folks' notes on this. Apologize, it was a long document.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We get it.
This is a little bit too deep for me. What is this?
So, looking at the descriptions of each of these entry features, it looked like you could break all the rules of them as long as you just had a covering over
So,
entry.
Here's the response I got on this, and now I recognize why I didn't do much with it, is, it says, the answer is, so your question is that there's not much differentiation between these, and that you could effectively meet the same goal by simply saying it has to be covered. The answer is, intentionally, it's very flexible. Right? We're not trying to get to a hard set of design standards, but we are trying to put parameters around the different types so that there is the creation of usable space. So that's ultimately what, so it's attempting to get to the objectives of marking, first off, marking the entry point, right? We're not masking where the entrance is, we're marking an entry point, and we're providing cover on that entry point. And then the parameters that are placed in it are meant to ensure that it's some form of usable space. I referred to you to many, many houses, particularly through the 90s and early 2000s, were built with what I call decorative front porches. They're entirely useless.
I understand that.
So that's the objective, and then now I leave it to you as to what you guys, whether you guys want to keep it or not.
I guess my concern was if I wanted to build a front porch that didn't cover 30% of my house, but covered 20%, I could, and I could just say it's a covered entry.
Sure.
Is how I'm reading the code.
But this way we get lots of nice, pretty pictures, which breaks it up once we're at page 158 of the document.
All right.
So.
It just seemed like a big old loophole where it just, we're not really giving any regulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a wide set of,
Okay.
it's supposed to be, the words here are intentionally very flexible.
I guess, okay, I like the flexibility, very much like the flexibility. My concern is if I ever, do another house in this town and I do a front porch that doesn't match this, am I
Well,
gonna be able to do the?
Is there something you're concerned about not matching?
I don't know if the width wants to be less than 30% of the house, which I guess if you've got 40 feet, it's getting pretty small. I don't know.
But
It just seemed funny that it's, well, you definitely, you need to fix the finished floor elevation if we keep these, which I think you put in your notes.
Yep, I did.
Because,
But the covered entry also is the same, -2 and 6, so
yeah,
it's different from the other. So you could just call everything a covered entry,
Right.
to your point,
yeah,
yeah.
it kind of defeats the purpose of the whole section.
So, I'm having a hard time keeping up. Where are we?
I am, if James really wants to keep this in here, I'm fine with that, but as long as we fix the floor elevation, so there's no conflict with our building floor elevations, but, my personal preference would be just to require that every entry feature has a covering that is, a foot wider than the door and 3 feet deep or something. Which I think you described, I think it's described in the code for, yeah.
For what, a covered entry?
I think somewhere it mentioned it has to extend out beyond the edge of the door and has to stick out a certain amount.
Right, but I mean, some of the examples provided are like a recessed vestibule.
Which is still covered.
It is, yep.
I don't want to take up a lot of time with this. It just,
I mean, you've got concerns on the floor elevation, why don't we just land that?
as long as we fix the floor
The
elevation,
is
that's the
very
big
easy to
thing.
fix,
Okay,
so
okay.
The notes say.
All right, I don't understand, wrong link. What are we talking about?
It's the wrong
It's been
section.
fixed.
It's just pointed to the wrong section.
Okay, so good. Wow, guess what? We are ready to make recommendations on Article 2. I don't think there was anything left that we didn't settle on Article 2. Good job, guys.
Did we talk about downtown
But-
setbacks? I thought it was in here.
Make sure.
That's with the maps, I think.
Oh, it's in the map.
But
There's
Rory,
technically a map.
was there anything else in Article 2 that you wanted to bring up that we didn't talk about? Article 2, just Article
I
2.
think so.
There may be a few things, yeah.
So that other preservation Piedmont proposal, that demolitions for the existing preservation bonus, 25 feet, in ADC districts has to be
Slow
subject. Okay, so Preservation Piedmont sent that email, 2 proposals. One was the RC existing structure preservation we already talked about. The other was clarifying that in design control districts, to get that bonus and demolishing anything behind 25 feet behind your facade would need BAR approval. My understanding is that any demolition or partial demolition requires that anyway in ADC districts.
Right.
So I'm fine with clarifying it if it clarifies things.
Yeah, it honestly just feels like extraneous language though, too. Like, the rules don't change because it's not mentioned in one section and is mentioned somewhere else.
Okay, I'm fine with verbally clarifying it just now, which you just did, if
Yeah.
that satisfies them too. I'm sure I'm gonna get a text from Jenny in just a second here.
Well, she can text me as well, because I agree with you.
There's clarity necessary? That
No,
there's some
that,
confusion?
that verbally clarifying it is enough, because it's,
Yeah.
I don't
We're
think
good.
we should not have duplicative language that confuses other sections where that language doesn't exist. So if the BAR has purview, they have purview, and we don't need to write it into the code.
We didn't talk about maximum width in R zones. I would propose, so, for example, in RA, we have a maximum width on an up to 60 feet wide lot of 40 feet, effectively requiring a 60, or a 10-foot side setback on 60-foot wide exactly lots. And then more than 60 feet wide, we have a 60 feet width. I would just consolidate those to 60. I think the intent is that we don't have buildings that are super long in these districts. For those thinner lots, I think the side setback does what side setbacks are there to do. And this is sort of doing a backdoor, imposing a different one depending on the exact width of your lot. And I don't see that it serves the same purpose. And more generally, I think side setbacks are the worst kind of setback. It's useless. No one's hanging out in their 5-foot or 10-foot side yard. And the more you force a side setback, you're squeezing the buildings the other way, and you get less of a usable backyard. So I would
Well,
just.
I don't have anything in front of me to read, so I'm having a hard time following. Can you
Yep.
just tell us what it is you wanted to?
Yep, so taking that different maximum building width and just combining them into one, just a maximum building width
Got
of
it.
60 feet, or whatever it is for the larger one. You probably want to get rid of it altogether, or make it bigger, or extend single-family houses.
I was making myself get warmed up to the 40 feet, which was, I know it's smaller than a lot of our existing houses, but I'm not worried about townhouses anymore, or duplexes, because my understanding, and James, this was gonna be a question for you, James, is
Yeah.
if I have a duplex and they're structurally independent, they're both 40 feet, they have their own, it's not the sum of the two of them that's 40 feet, like I could have a 25-foot wide duplex and 25-foot wide duplex next to each other, right?
Yes, that's for a specific.
Because there is some language about if they're structurally independent, but like a duplex shares a roof surface, even though they've got the firewall.
Oh, right.
Wait, you mean the two sides of a duplex?
Yeah, each half.
Hmm.
So you could have a duplex, two units touching each other that are 50 feet wide, I'm assuming. Asking,
On a single parcel?
yes. Because they're structurally independent. If not, then the 40 feet is definitely not enough. It's enough for a habitat duplex, but that's a very, very small
Yeah.
duplex. Sorry, I just
All right, so here's what I got
That's
in
what architects
response. So
do.
your question was, does this allow for a side-by-side duplex that shares a roof surface but is structurally independent?
Two buildings may
And the
abut
answer-
one another.
Slow down, guys.
The answer that came back is it could share a roof surface and that it would be the same height, but it would have to be separate structurally and would likely include some extension of a firewall or similar like townhouses typically have.
Okay.
Provided they have no shared components and are structurally independent is
So
the
they-
rule.
They do share a roof surface, but not it sounds like your answer is that's okay.
Well, in that case, they wouldn't if you're extending the firewall.
Well,
Extension of a firewall.
the firewall extends to the underside of the sheathing.
Okay.
So that's a typical detail that you can do. But it does mean that if one catches on fire, it's designed to collapse and leave the other one standing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what this.
But in that case, if it's only extends to the underside of the sheathing, you would share a roof. And
Yeah,
it sounds
but
like they're talking
it's-
about the ones where the firewall goes higher than the roof.
So, but the first part of the response is it could share a roof surface. in that they are agreeing with what he is saying.
Oh, okay.
So what is our
Well,
recommendation?
then
Wait a
that's
minute, there was a-
separate.
So I'm
from
happy
that.
with the 40 feet.
What is, can someone?
So if I have a 60-foot lot and there's 5-foot side setbacks, we're saying you have to, wait, you have to have a 40-foot max building width, therefore it's a 10-foot side setback, just because my
Right,
lot
so-
is 60
so
feet.
part of what's happening here is we are moving away from the notion that setback is defining your building size. And we're moving towards the notion that the role of a setback is to define placement. And then the
Sure.
rules around footprint, building width are defining size.
All right, I'll take a different tack. We're saying if you have a 61-foot lot, you're allowed to have a 50-foot building, but if the
Yes.
lot next door is 60 feet, then a 50-foot building would be horribly out of scale there. And I say, if we think 60 feet, if we think, 60 feet is the longest building you want to walk by, then it should just be 60 feet across the board, and it doesn't matter what the lot size is. That it's
Okay.
just,
Yeah, I mean, this change was introduced by, it came out of one of the conversations here at this table.
Oh,
that got us to
interesting.
this.
I don't remember that.
So we can, if you guys want to go in a different direction, I think you have to state so.
well, that's what I say. 60, I mean, I think we have lots of houses, typically ranches, that are longer than that. But, I mean, regardless, I think 60 feet, I'm not against keeping the 60-foot limit. The 40-foot limit is going to get restrictive, right? Like, let's say you have an apartment building where you're trying to have 2 units and then a stairwell in the middle. You're getting them to less than 20 feet. Well, I mean, say your stairwell is, what, 10 feet wide if you're really squeezing it in?
The 40 feet, what zones does that apply to?
We're talking about the R zones here.
Is it all R or is it just RA?
40 feet in RA, and then I think it goes up a little bit. Nope, also RB.
Okay, then I agree,
Um,
I've got a problem.
And then it's 70 feet and 100 in, oh wait,
You agree that you've got a
Yeah.
problem.
I
70
agree that
feet.
40 feet is insufficient for RB if you're gonna have a small little apartment building.
So what is 60?
Be content with that.
yeah, I think just squeeze those into one requirement that applies to all lots, 60 feet.
Right, put in a statement for us so we can,
Yeah, just, building massing, RA and RB, maximum width of 60 feet across the board.
Mr. Duranzi, are you cool with that?
I am cool with that, yes.
I would like to introduce a complication.
Please.
Of course.
I like 40 feet for a single-family detached building. I think it makes sense. It has allows for a walkable, pedestrian-friendly, more affordable, more engaging.
Single detached building.
Yes. I see value in that. I understand that creates geometrical complications if you have more than single-family detached in the structure. Can we regulate differently based on
Whether
building
it's
type?
Multiple or single.
Right.
Seems like overkill to me. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I mean, we're already restricting their height pretty strictly. I mean, there are a lot of single-family detached houses that are like 60 feet. This random one I just scrolled into is completely randomly. It's 59 feet. So I don't think it's problematic. This other random one I scrolled into is 75 feet. We're already restricting it pretty strictly, I think, at 60 feet. I might make an argument if I wanted to be here longer tonight that the whole 60-foot minimum is way too restrictive. But I'm not gonna do that. So I think it's enough.
So it looks like we've got you and me, which would like a little differentiation, but we've got 3 guys that say 60 feet is the right way to go across the board.
I'm agnostic on this, on Lyle's point.
I just don't wanna complicate this code.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one,
Already
that's the
is.
one, that's the one issue, I mean.
All right, so I think we're gonna go with 60.
That's fine.
Mayor Snook, do you think your house is too wide? Or
I was thinking about it because if you count my screen porch, I'm more than 60 feet wide.
Yeah.
yeah, 64 feet?
Yeah.
About 4 feet too wide, I'd say. I
What
think
else-
it's fine.
What else do you have?
It's also a one-story rancher with a basement, so it's not exactly luxurious.
Yeah,
It's
so,
not-
now we're allowing 2.5 stories, I think it's fine. All right. Are any of these other?
Did you want to
Oh,
go back to?
this was.
I'm just laughing.
Is this technically? Well, this is sort of Article 2, and it's sort of Article 4. The height bonus in the higher zones for affordability. So we're saying if you're in CX3, we'll give you a 2-story bonus for 50% of AMI, which is a lot. It's 66% of a bonus. And if you're in NX10, where you can build 10 stories, we're going to give you a 2-story bonus, which is now 20%. That is a lot less of an incentive in the places where we presumably are like the most desirable, where we want more people to be in general and to ideally to provide actual affordable units, and in big buildings where we would be getting a lot of units out of that bonus.
Would you like to tackle this now or wait till we get to Article 4?
I did lump this in with Article 4.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Speaking on the lumping in with, this may be under development standards as well, but the shop front house issue and the residential
Yeah,
requirement.
this one, I was just going back to my notes. So, it's a question you guys can debate.
Under when to talk about it. Well, first I'll point out that that somewhere in the shop front house, people were using R1 residential as an expression. We need to go back and edit for that.
Could you repeat that?
What?
We're saying in all R1 districts,
say that.
section 284B.
I'm sorry, what are we looking at? The document that I put together or in the?
The shop, no, in the draft. In the,
If it was Munico, I'm sorry.
so this is 253 page number to help you get there, 2-53.
What does it say?
Oh, no, it doesn't,
It
actually.
just
I'm-
says R with the
Yeah,
parentheses.
never mind. I take it back.
You've led us astray.
I led you astray. R dash districts. I read it as R1. I apologize.
So, yes, you made that the horizontal vertical.
Yeah, well, look, there are other sins that have been committed by architects at this table, I'm sure.
Are there any other
Let's
articles?
get to the policy question that you raised, though, right?
Yeah.
The policy question was requiring a residential.
Yeah, so where do we discuss that now? Because that's in 2.8.5.
Where I would put that actually is in the commercial uses.
3?
Yeah, and 3.
Okay,
We'll get to it.
so,
What you got?
I think that's all I got for
Mr.
2.
Breeze, what do you got in 2, Article 2, that we haven't talked about?
Let me see if there's any of these others.
Oh, well, there was, I mean, it's a minor thing.
Why are you thinking, let's hear.
Someone pointed out that in the opening provision section, in like the summer, that's not where it is. In the beginning of the residential section, in like the summary of RA and such, it says things like 2.5 stories, but now it's based on how many units there are. I don't know if we want to fix how that section summary goes.
Okay.
oh, yeah.
It's not a huge deal since it's just a helpful summary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
still
it's
acceptable.
it's not regulatory. I think what that section is trying to do is identify the base standard. Honestly, in that scenario, what is the base standard? There isn't,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's
it's both
fair.
of them, right?
Well, in that case, we can change all the 40-foot building widths to 60. That's the base standard now.
Yeah.
Right. What else we got, Mr. Breeze? Article 2.
Carl, you raised a question around architectural elements and the level of vertical encroachment.
Again, yeah, it seemed funny that they're shorter than parapets. And I don't know, if someone wants to put a spire on their house. I don't know, it seems like just give them a little more height.
All right, so do you have a number?
No. Shoot, what are parapets?
We gotta make a recommendation.
I didn't see it in the list that was given to us, so I thought it was just rejected. Or I forgot about it.
No, it ended up on this, some of them I put over here because there wasn't a specific
Mhm.
recommendation, and I
Gotcha.
didn't know what to do with it.
IBC says 30 inches.
Is what a parapet height is, the safety, yeah.
Well, no, it's, well, more than
No,
that.
it is more than that.
But what's allowed in our code is, I forget, is it
3
6 feet? Or is it?
Sorry, architectural elements or parapets?
Parapets in our code. I can't, what section?
Are they in there?
Yeah. It's called safety barriers.
Oh, 6 feet.
6 feet, okay. So architectural elements, 10 feet.
And as your item being the spire or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you're gonna get out of that.
Or a
but,
little,
it's not habitable.
an onion
It's
top,
just a
sort of.
decorative, yeah. Like if someone has I don't know, you see some of the houses on Park Street that have little turrets and whatnot.
They can always put up a 75-foot amateur radio antenna.
Right, with
Protected by
a,
state code.
with a service platform 65 feet up. Right, gotcha.
So where are we?
Or James is still going through his list.
Yeah, let me go through
Unless,
these.
is everyone okay with architectural element having a pertinent height of 10 feet
Yeah, I'm fine with
to
that.
get it above a parapet? Should there be a parapet?
Are you okay with it?
Yes,
Well, then I'm okay with it.
I think. I mean,
Wait,
I
10
pulled that
feet or
number out
6
of.
feet?
Parapets, towers, where?
10, so it's 4 feet
How many of
taller
our
than the allowed
castle
parapet
builders are
height.
gonna be?
So it's an architectural element behind the parapet. I don't know. That's
Theoretically.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
Put all
yeah,
the architectural elements you want in there.
It would,
Nowadays, architects aren't putting any elements in there. They're just making boring boxes with colors, so.
unfortunately,
crazy.
it will not be a 10-foot tall cornice. I'm sorry.
That's a damn shame.
All right, small things, there was a note on the living wall about deleting and irrigation. I don't think it's a requirement that there's irrigation in there, I don't think it should be read as that, it's simply allowing for the notion that you can include it.
Okay. And I'm wondering, is that, yeah, I'm fine. It just
Yeah.
seems like it would be great to require vegetation that doesn't need irrigation, but maybe that is wishful thinking.
I've seen some great
In-
examples of living walls that are all dead.
So
Well, and
forget I
that's the
said it.
point, it's, right, when the living wall is elevated and not actually touching the ground, you've gotta get something,
Yeah, okay.
all right, that's it for Article 3.
Article 3 shouldn't be as complicated, I don't think, but,
Famous last words.
Oh, man, are we starting with me?
So this is a mixture of different folks in this one. I just put everything that was use table stuff. I'd like to think, the first one is just correcting an error in the links, right? It was linking to into the wrong section, so that's fine, I assume. Mobile food units, we just wanted to specify that the code is regulating on private property, so
Mhm.
this is not affecting what happens in the street or
So-
down the street, so.
So my neighbor could have a block party and we could have a food truck.
Yep, park it on the street.
Just don't go on anyone's driveway.
Just don't put it in his yard, right.
Okay.
Or hope the zoning enforcement officer doesn't come by while you have it parked in the driveway. No,
Don't
you're-
Don't
Don't
do it in your
invite
friend's
opposing,
house.
right,
Don't
no,
invite
don't
James
bring him
to
to
the-
the party, right.
Not me, I'm not.
bullet number 3 sounds like you, Lyle, was that you?
What was that?
Bullet number 3 sounds like you, take care.
Yep,
Oh, that was me, actually, but I was channeling my inner Lyle.
Okay.
I like it. I think I've said this before.
I do have one change for the homestay one. This is a,
Did we all agree on the daycare center
Oh,
12
yeah, I mean,
plus
it's-
by
Yeah,
SUP?
yeah,
Yeah,
anyone.
Yeah, fine.
SUP.
Actually, we just had a daycare center over 12 in R1 recently, right? So homestays, right now, one of the things in there is we're defining permanent residency as 180 days, which is actually not half of the year, which typically has 365, sometimes 366 days. If we could change that to 184, so it actually is half the year, and you could like use the proof from any other document anywhere that you actually live there, because everyone else requires half the year plus one. That seems like a very simple change that might make Reed and Craig's job a little bit easier, that no one is gonna hopefully send us 40 emails about.
Seems reasonable.
I don't know the laws, but that sounds good if that's true.
I mean, the idea is that you're supposed to be there for half the
Yeah,
year.
half
We
year.
just
For a majority
rounded
of the year,
down to
yeah.
180 for
Yeah.
some
You're
reason.
supposed to be there for a majority of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
What, yeah,
So it's 184 days.
right, because 183 in a leap year would get you at exactly 50.
Yeah, I
gotcha.
don't want to deal with that headache.
He just said it's.
What do you, I don't
half the year plus one.
understand the bakery question. What are you asking there?
That's not me.
What is whoever? I don't understand.
God, I hope that wasn't me.
What is what?
Customer serving bakery.
Oh, that's me.
Is included in
What-
general
yeah,
food and
what's-
beverage.
what
So I
is it?
wanted to note that the definition of general food and beverage.
It's already there.
Specifically mentions bakeries, right?
Thank you very much.
So you're good.
Sean Tubbs said they were banned in the zoning. I got all freaked out.
Okay.
There is something in there about wholesale bakeries, right?
That's
And then-
different.
So retail bakery is just general, yeah.
Ooh,
This one was me, based on a public comment.
well, I do love outdoor entertainment.
So
got
the
noises.
Ravenna River Company would be banned under this current ordinance if it weren't legally non-conforming. I say we should allow new Ravenna River companies by special use permit. Why
Oh,
not?
by a special use permit.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you got it, okay. Yeah, I can imagine.
Fine with that?
Yeah,
Everyone's good with it? Cool.
by a special use permit, yeah.
Remote parking was also me, based on a public comment from, that one guy, Al Merle guy. Anyway, yeah, I can't remember. So the idea, he was concerned that over by Fontaine, where we're allowing a mixed-use corridor on Fontaine itself, and there's those RX3 neighborhoods off of it, that remote parking would be allowed by right. And so you could just put your parking lots in that neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood would turn into parking lots serving that other place. I note that we do have the standard for only a certain amount of your floor area can be commercial, and remote parking would count as a commercial use. The problem is, presumably, if you raise everything and make it a parking lot, you have no floor area, right? It doesn't count. So another way to phrase this, I guess, would be making it so that parking lots count as floor area for that purpose.
I think this is the easier way to do it.
This is by SUP only.
Yeah.
I think that's fine, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I
The-
completely missed that.
So I want to note, because you just raised it as well, there was a question raised about this, and I believe I actually incorrectly answered the question at some point in time. So just to clarify, on the record, in the RX district, commercial uses must not exceed 25% of the floor area on the lot. So that's just to make it abundantly clear that the RX district is a primarily residential district. Any commercial component is subsidiary.
Maximum of 25.
Yeah.
So now that we brought this up, are there other things that aren't in floor area that we might be worried about? I mean, parking seems like the big one. I
Utility?
don't know. Mr. Clark, send us an email if I forgot anything. Utilities? Like, you could put a substation there,
Or
or like a
I'm trying to
off-site
think.
stormwater facility?
Yeah.
A catchment
As
of
part
some
it.
sort, yeah.
As part of yeah.
Well, I have a separate thing that we'll talk about next time, I guess, about, right now, it's pretty common to have a lot that's all a stormwater facility for a subdivision.
Right.
And we,
Yes, that's in the subdivision section we got.
yeah. So I think it's probably fine.
All right, so I heard SUP for remote parking in the RX district.
Yeah.
All right. 3.4.4.A2.
Fine.
Oh yeah. So this is mine. This one's spicy.
Yep.
So
Spicy.
yeah, we've talked a lot about commercial in residential, neighborhood commercial, neighborhood scale, serving very limited in uses. Staff has recommended that all go through the SUP process, which I think will kill all of them. Small
Correct.
businesses aren't ready to. The small businesses that don't exist don't have the cash flow to survive a year-long SUP process. If we want them, and our comprehensive plan says that we do, to solve food equity issues, to allow small business, to provide more affordable space for new business, I think we need to allow them somewhere. And I think that Mayor Snook's proposal of allowing them on corners in RC by right is the best possible solution.
but still SUP all, everywhere else?
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I,
does that, I mean, how does that really address your,
It allows us to have some in existence, and then we can
Corner
judge.
lot, you're supposed to be right in the middle of the lot, then you gotta go through an SUP to get, if you want it in the middle of the street, corner, it'd be right.
you know, I'm saying just RC, but RC as opposed to everywhere else too? I mean, what's?
so you mean all corner lots or all lots?
All
Well, I'm
residential
starting with
lots.
corners.
All residence lots on the corner.
Yeah, that's what I'm driving at.
So we could, so give me an example of a building that could pop up in RA district.
Commercial uses otherwise allowed by special use are allowed by right on corner lots.
Yeah, so Greenbrier, corner lot, what could pop up there?
It's
Little
not-
cafe, a corner store.
Bakery?
It is limited to 2,500 feet. The up to 4,000 notwithstanding by the section right next to the one for RX zones that was mentioned earlier. All commercial uses in R zones, SUP or not, I guess, are limited to 2,500 square feet per lot.
I could certainly get comfortable with that in RC. I gotta think about RA and B.
I think our B and our C might make sense. There are,
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're most
Okay.
likely in RC because those are the biggest intersections,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, that's
I-
right, yeah, that's what I'm comfortable with.
I think either
RC.
way, they're very limited, and I'd still be surprised if any of them happen.
So you'd like to do RB, RNC for this?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't,
Yes, that's better than my idea.
No,
I don't know
like
about
everybody's idea, but
the
yours.
phrasing versus making it a, well, I don't know how you implement this idea. I don't know if this language is right, but I figure staff can figure that out. I also wonder if we want to do all uses allowed by special use permit or limit them to certain ones.
I had the same thought. I was most concerned about serving fresh produce.
Yeah, so general retail, well, we don't have a use for grocery specifically.
That's interesting.
I mean, of the ones that would be objectionable potentially, I mean, food and beverage is kind of one, it can produce impacts, odors, trash. Private club, I think that's in there for alumni hall. But maybe you wouldn't want one of those. It's
I
only
believe
RP
there's
RC.
more than one. Actually, I mean,
Oh,
the other
maybe.
one, Fry Spring,
It's not RB and RC though. That's a node of some kind.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if the North Downtown Pool thing counts as a club or operates according to zoning rules. Don't worry about that. So, general medical, I've heard some concern about, the idea of a medical express or whatever. That said, we allow certain medical uses already, psychology, and I don't see that a PCP would be outrageous. What do you guys think? The others are office, personal service, gym or studio, general retail. That's pretty much it.
All right, Lau, what would you like to do with this one?
I would like
What
to.
would you like to do with this one?
I think it makes sense to do RB and RC at corners by right.
Scale commercial, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
good with RC.
I'm RBRC.
E. What
B,
about
yeah,
R?
B and C.
Any B? Any B
Well,
for you? Carl? B doesn't work.
I'd rather see an SUP for that. There are too many corners for RB, whereas it's very clear what corners are available for RC.
Okay, I think I agree with you, actually, but we gotta see what the rest of the team thinks.
I mean, I vote RB. There are very few RC corners.
So I think we're 3-2,
Yep,
RB.
so we're gonna do R, B, and C with Mr. Schwartz and me dissenting.
I mean, there are very few corners overall, honestly.
All right, before we move off this section, because it would be inserted in same section, Phil, I think this was your item about requiring a residential use.
Right,
in use
so
commercial, let's-
just, yeah.
Same,
so-
same topic, different
Yeah.
requirement.
Different requirement that, on the philosophy that residential, R means residential, our point is to increase housing stock. If we're gonna do these things, if you're gonna have a commercial use under the shop front, that you need to have at least one residential unit there.
I'm fine with that for this by right allowance. I think it can be waived by SUP, and that's fine, because there are probably circumstances where it makes sense. Like right down to River Company. No one wants to live there, it's in a floodplain. But
But
if-
they're already there.
for the by right allowance, that seems like a reasonable rule.
Well, we can eliminate the flood zone, but
Is that writable into the code? That
Say it again?
differentiate, I mean,
Is
does
what
that make
writable?
sense that it could be SUP for,
well, if we're just gonna tack it on to this RBRC by right.
okay.
But in those cases, an RBRC by right, you gotta have a residential unit.
So
And
instead
if you
of-
don't have a residential unit, you're gonna have to get an SUP for that.
So to use Lyle's language, it would be commercial uses otherwise allowed by special use permit, blah, 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 are allowed by right on corner lots in a mixed-use development in RC.
I'm sorry,
So we're combining those two together.
oh, you're gonna
Mixed
put-
use requirement
you're
for
suggesting
the
putting
by
it in
right
the
on
Same
corner lots.
line.
Or however you guys want to write that. Surely has.
No,
Can
because that
make it
limits,
more-
doesn't that limit you to 25% commercial use? That's not what we're driving at.
No, no, the 25% commercial use is for our X zones.
RX, all right.
The R zone requirement is 2,500
Square
square feet
feet.
maximum.
Right,
Is max.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I mean,
I
the
could-
basic concept we're getting at is a residential, a minimum of one unit.
Correct.
Is required.
And I could see imposing an even smaller requirement than 2,500 square feet on those by right ones, if it'll make you guys feel happier about RB and RC. I mean, I think 1,500 square feet could work for almost any use of that
Well,
kind.
I think once, if we go back there, we're really almost strangling people who need a certain amount of floor area to do a certain amount of business.
Well, then they do it in a special use permit process.
Well,
I
then
guess.
again, we get the same problem, is that these are small
Well,
businesses
no one's
trying to
ever gonna
start, you
do
wait,
it, yeah.
you wait in a year to get, yeah, it's good.
But you might have a scenario where you could start with 1,500 and then grow as necessary.
Yeah,
or you have
I
customers who
think,
love you, might
I
actually
think we're
pass.
chasing I think this is one of these solutions in search of a problem, but, I mean, I won't die on the hill, but.
All right,
All right, next one.
what are we talking about here? Walk-up windows?
So drive-throughs, to solve the Canes problem, they don't have staff, they close everything but their drive-through. That backs up all the way down 29, and their very expensive new 250 on-ramp has turned into the Canes drive-through line. The idea, and we imposed this on the Not a Shake Shack
Right.
at Kmart, is that when your drive-through windows open, you have to serve people who walk up or some other way,
I
right?
mean, so the drive-through windows have to be open and the dining room has to be open, people have to.
Or a walk-up window. So the idea is, if you're a pedestrian, you aren't excluded from that restaurant entirely.
So you can't be exclusively if you have a drive-through, you cannot operate exclusively through that drive-through,
Yeah.
period. You have to have some other way of.
Yeah, so,
accessing.
two problems. I mean, the direct public impact is that that sort of scenario can and does create horrible, horrible traffic problems in the city. The other thing is, just to create a more pedestrian-friendly city, we shouldn't have businesses that are excluding pedestrians as a class.
Okay, so that would be, I think we're okay on both of those, right? Both bullets?
Yep.
All right, cyclists.
Yeah, I mean, biking on sidewalks is banned, so why do we
We
say
could
that? That's
take a
fine.
different approach on this.
We
I
could
know.
unban biking
We could
on
unban
sidewalks.
bikes on sidewalks.
I'm fine with that.
We're-
It's not in our purview,
wanna
but
do that.
Yeah, I think.
I think there are large areas of the city where it's fine to bike on the sidewalk and you would die otherwise.
I do it in the
Hydraulic
county.
Road comes to mind. And I actually would prefer removing that. It doesn't
I-
matter for this section, right? If it's cleared zone for pedestrians to get by your sandwich board, you're not impeding cyclists either, probably, so.
Yeah, frankly, if we encounter a circumstance where a cyclist, for their own safety, pops up onto a sidewalk and gets a ticket, I will gladly gladly show up in general district court
That's
for
fair.
that.
I think there's a
Probably
policy, it's
not.
not enforced.
Yeah,
It's not.
I think it's probably.
It's just a paper policy.
But for this section is like, if you're putting a sandwich board out on the sidewalk or an outdoor dining area, you can't block pedestrians and cyclists from getting by. And I say it should just say add pedestrians, because that's the only thing that's legal.
Where you can't block movement, yeah.
All
Period.
right, let's go to the map. I've skipped over the questions, because I think we can come back to those later if we have time.
Yeah, the special exception process, does anyone want to talk about that?
Let's
Yeah,
do
we
the
have to
map
do
first.
both.
Yeah, let's do the
How
map
do you
first,
wanna
because
do
I
it?
think, I'm thinking the map isn't gonna be that hard, but
I think special exception is gonna be easy.
Yeah.
What's that?
Special
You know,
exceptions
y'all,
seem fine to
y'all,
me. I'm
just
like-
quit.
Let's go to the map.
Quit jerking. Quit.
So who's got
jinxing
number
yourself here.
one, item number one, West Main Street, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that was me. The buildings are already taller than 5 stories. I think west of the bridge, we just need to let it be CX8. That said, I highlighted there that there is no required transition between RX and CX. So if there's an issue with the wall forming in front of or behind West Haven, whether it's 5 stories or 8 stories, we're not fixing it. We haven't found a way to resolve that.
So,
Just a really complicated.
one way to solve that issue is to downzone West Haven and make CRJ get a rezoning when they need to develop it, which is a bit of a pain for them, but creates that transition requirement. I don't know about that.
The
but-
other side of that is, do we want transitions for an area we want to redevelop?
So right now, I think the only tool we have is the BAR, and it's fuzzy if the BAR can regulate, we can regulate the backside of the buildings, but it's just kind of, it's a fuzzier thing. So, I still think West Main needs to be CX8 because it's already CX8, and if there's gonna be tall buildings somewhere, that's a place that tall buildings deserve to be.
Yeah. We also, earlier in the year, were told that it was an accident that flipped CX8
Yeah,
east
yeah.
and west of the bridge, and then
We don't-
you were gonna flip it back, but then you just made everything CX5 except for the train station and some random other parcels.
Yeah, this can be CX8.
I'm fine with CX8.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about your comments, James, down there at the bottom?
There are my comments. Those
That's
are-
mine.
those
Those
are-
are yours.
Yeah.
So you just,
I'm just highlighting that so we know that that's there. The other thing on here was the 14th Street neighborhood, which I think also blends with one of Rory's suggestions. I didn't take it as far as he did, but I wanted to see where it's RX3 around 14th Street. I wanted to see more RX5.
it's fine.
I spent a lot of time on that map, let's
Yeah,
wait till 9.
We
Plus,
can
I
wait
think
till
my
Rory gets there.
boundaries
You're
are
right.
better.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Not just better drawn, but also includes like way up Madison,
Yeah,
where
which
it's just a bunch of,
makes sense.
yeah.
Where
Makes
are we?
sense.
So
We're-
We're gonna wait till we get to Rory's page and
Okay.
talk about it. Sorry, I just made an objective.
That is
There you
fine.
go.
Should we do the same for Barracks Road and?
Yes,
29 North?
except that I ended up not, well, yeah, fine, yeah. Because I ended up not drawing the Fifth Street one, but I agree with you, I just
One-
was very tired.
One pitch at a time.
All right, so we're gonna skip Barracks Road and do that
So
with
we're on
Rory.
page 3.
And 29, or Emmett, not Barracks, Emmett Street and 29 we'll do with Rory. Fifth Street, made this argument before, I don't wanna have a missed opportunity where someone might do a 10-story building and they only do 8 because we only allow 8. Especially since this area has access to the Ravenna Trail. It has access to Food Line, to Wegmans, it has access to transit. It is not the center of the city, but it seems like it's a place that no one's gonna be offended if we have dense development and,
So,
Mhm.
oh, I mean, if you weren't finished.
I'm done.
I guess on your thing, you write CX10. I guess my only issue is CX10 doesn't exist, and the flum
good.
category only goes to CX8. But I think we had talked about how we can make the mapping logic work for this, and my suggestion was like, at key intersections or along horrible, 4-lane to 6-lane Schroeds like 29 and Fish Street would be my argument for it being logical and supportable.
Near grocery stores?
Near grocery stores, not near anybody who will care.
So what are we doing with that one?
What are we
I say
doing?
CX8 for the whole area he circled down there.
You good with that?
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's just, once someone builds a 5-story building, it's there. And we lose the opportunity for the potential of, extra housing in that location.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Page 4.
So,
So this is the one place where I did drop a comment in, so I just wanna, I wanna understand whether the
Why?
transitions as presented change the perspective about doing split zoning here or not. And I'm gonna, Carl, take it away.
Well, I'm gonna punt that question back to you, because I think that's an interesting thought, and I don't know.
Okay.
So, how is height regulated? Height is regulated from the street front, correct? Stories height is
Yep.
regulated from your street frontage.
Yep.
Is there anything in there that talks about when you have a through lot? That I don't remember.
It's gonna be on both, on any street frontage, the
Mhm.
stories apply, so yes.
So where do you get the,
So if you have a
Yeah,
setback
where's the-
above a step back above 5 stories, let's think of the 1709 JPA building, 'cause it's useful, right? Technically, their step back is on the 7th or 8th story, but it's only the 3rd story or the 4th story on the Montebello side. Does it need to step back earlier because of this transition requirement? Or does it need to step back higher because of the transition requirement, allowing 5 stories on that frontage? Does that make sense?
Probably, but I'm looking it up, so.
Should we break out the giant
one thing I noted is
Post-its?
the question all right, so I do think one of the issues we have here is that we're using a type B transition. So if my lot, so if I'm on the JPA side, I've got a CX5 or 8, let me look at the 5 for a second. Up against RX3,
There should be 3-story setback,
right.
or step back.
do you know what page of our PDF we're on for step backs, or for
Uh,
transition zones?
It's 259 is the type, or 258 is the type B transition in the red line, or in the no red line version. But it's 4-40.
So one thing I
4-50.
noted is that we probably have the wrong, I think we might have the wrong transition at play in this instance,
What,
but maybe not, I don't
How do you mean?
I don't know, I was working on this late,
like it should be a type C, which has a
Yes,
step back
that's-
above the 3rd story?
right, something like that,
Would that, are there other areas that would impact?
I don't know.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, if I might on this one,
Yes, yes.
I have been listening. And I don't want to interject too much, but I would really discourage using split zoning. It creates nightmares going into the future with respect to development of properties, transferal of properties if it's sold. Just the experiences that I've had with them are not good. So if you can avoid split zoning, that would be preferable.
Thanks. Yeah, if the transition can work, I think that would be great.
Maybe we work more on what the transition was.
And also just going to the question of, if there wasn't a transition, and you have a through lot with a topographic change like this, how is the height regulated in that sense? Trying to understand where the building would have, maybe it's simpler than I'm making it out in my mind to be, that it just would have to, topography would tell you where it has to
The
drop.
topography is what controls, right, at the end of the day, so the topography, remember the height basically breaks it out into module space on the topography.
Okay.
And so you do end up with, I think in this instance, the step back required by the transition helps you,
Mhm.
because the topography is so steep that it essentially lops off that height. But I defer to you, if you can take a closer look at this, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. My goal would be to get CX8 along JPA, as long as it didn't do something awful on Montebello. But, okay, I will see if I can puzzle.
the main place I see with a similar transition from an 8 zone to a 3 zone is along Market Street, where we downzone the top side to 3. Otherwise, for the most part, changing that one from a type B to a type C would not have an impact, I think.
And that,
The other
what I
one,
was doing was type C was between the 5-story and the 3-story in the back.
the other one is within the scrapyard, since we made it 3 and 8, which I prefer 5
It
and
would
8.
be within, right? It would be, yeah.
Yeah. Which, that's weird. You have a
Yeah.
step back within your parcel.
Mm-hmm.
It's odd.
Well, that comes back to it's not, in that instance, it's technically not split zoning because those are multiple
Those are different
parcels.
parcels, yeah.
But we all understand that that's under single ownership, and so we are kind of self-imposing that issue.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't talked about it yet, a special exception process to discuss.
Sure. But, at first glance, I think making it a type C transition is what makes sense there. So embedded in this, is there a suggestion that these parcels should become CX8 as long as we have a good transition there? And that seems logical to me too. Because if you're talking about key intersections, that's one of the keyest intersections in the whole city housing-wise, right? Like, that's right next to the lawn where all the kids want to be.
That makes sense, James?
Cool. We are clearly in this language stretching the definition of key intersection.
Or we're just saying it's, a few hundred feet from the intersection like we did with the RC definition in a lot of places. Technically, it's in the map logic.
And I think that, the language of the future land use map, I assume was meant to be fairly flexible in case there was a condition where it just seemed to warrant something else.
Yeah, it's really the mapping logic that's training us, right? Because you have the same at-key intersections in medium and in whatever this card was called. So, like, in one case, we determined it to mean within 400 feet of the intersection, and the other, we said literally right adjacent to the intersection, and I don't see a problem, logically speaking, with
Fair enough.
broadening that second one.
I know someone else mentioned the step back map, but I'll just throw this out there. This is going to be where Jenny Keller emails me. I would like to get rid of the step back requirement and just leave it to the BAR. It has been a technical problem in many cases, and it should be a case-by-case basis.
This is the step back part.
Applies in the
back.
downtown district.
Yes.
Except that our map is larger than the
Downtown,
downtown
Market
district.
Street, or the mall, Market Street, I don't have the map.
Main Street, all the side streets, yeah. South Street was the other big one.
So, any place that's under BAR purview, well, actually, I think anywhere on that, I would just get rid of the whole step back map. If we want to say that there should be a step back after 3 stories and just leave the depth up to the BAR, I'm also okay with that, but I would prefer just leave it entirely to the BAR.
Yeah, and
All right, so I'm not arguing against that, but I want to point out that the idea has also been raised that the BAR should not be able to reduce massing. So that's a policy question that needs to be addressed, because if the BAR can't reduce massing, then they can't address the step backs.
can we say the BAR may require step backs?
Still-
Is that too much discretion?
Why don't we jump to that, because that's a discussion I'd love to have. Who would like to not let the BAR reduce massing? I have a guess as who that would be, but.
Depends on the circumstances.
I would like to apply a reasonableness standard. If we're talking about like a parcel, like $1 million parcel downtown, and the BAR is like, yeah, 1 story. We think 1 story. That doesn't strike me as reasonable.
I'm pretty sure the council would overturn that right away.
Right.
I think in every case, the BAR has been more permissive than not, historically.
West Second?
We've allowed more height than, I think we've been pretty reasonable as far as allowing height.
I mean, bearing in mind BAR composition can always change, but the other point I want to make in this is that the BAR should always be subject to its guidelines, its published and adopted guidelines, which we are now in the process of updating. And
Yeah.
so that's what, at the end of the day, what we really are saying is that it's not up to the BAR whether they can reduce massing. It is what is published within those guidelines.
Yeah, so I mean, a big problem for me would be predictability, but if the guidelines are up to date and reasonable, presumably we have that regardless. I mean, I think there have been times that BAR opposed increasing massing. West Second comes to mind, that were not reasonable. Generally speaking, I hate step backs. They make a building look worse. They make it inefficient. They make it leak prone. They get that weird ziggurat form that Waterhouse has instead of the beautiful clean form that the Wells Fargo building has. I think one concern that was raised at a work session a little while ago was getting sunlight to the mall and to the trees in the mall, which should really only apply then to the buildings on the south side of the mall, which I'd be okay with. I think giant step backs along Market are a terrible idea. I think a lot of the side street step back requirements are terrible. Well, I mean, they're okay because they're only 5 feet, but still they're unnecessary. That said, I guess I'm okay with saying, since I don't think I'm going to get you all to agree that not having any step backs is better, that BAR may require them along the mall.
I will say, if the BAR can't reduce the height from the 10 stories that's allowed in the mall, I'm going to strongly recommend that we downzone the whole mall.
Yeah, because the historic buildings we have there are
Because
terrible, I
allowing 10
guess.
stories by right along the whole mall is that could be problematic. And I think that's going to get us something that a lot of people in this town don't want.
So, all right, so we don't have in DX, we don't have a bonus for affordability,
No, I
right?
think
We put that back in.
We put that back in.
That was happened here at the
Right,
table.
so if that's the case, we don't want the BAR in a position of reducing height and mass on affordable, I mean, that's a straight up putting their thumb on the affordability scale.
Well, that's assuming that they would.
Well, I'm saying that they should not be allowed to reduce height that is brought on by affordable housing bonus.
Well,
They could
council can
require-
always overturn them if they think that despite the BAR guidelines, there's a broader public purpose.
We'll flip it the other way.
And what's most likely to
If
happen.
council's the absolute, is the final authority, if they want to reduce the height, they can.
Well, the problem is, the way the process works is the BAR rules and then you can appeal. We'd have to have a whole new process.
No, I mean, the BR wouldn't have a say in it. The city council could reduce the height of the project when it came to them if they wanted to.
But it doesn't come to city
Yeah,
council.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't in that case, that's true.
Yeah, it comes to them if BAR denies it and then they appeal.
Denies it, and then you go over, yeah, it's a problem.
I have a quantifiable reasonableness standard, 10%. What?
I think the BAR should have their purview that they have, which is it needs to fit the context, it needs to be an appropriate site-by-site application. And my guess is in most cases, there's gonna be, like our unfinished hotel, a very deep step back, and then height I think the BAR actually recommended the last time they came back that the developer could add a couple more stories to that building. So I'm not worried about the BAR telling people they can't build high, but I do think they need to have the ability to say, you need to let light onto the mall, you need to, if you have a historic storefront, you need to step back a certain amount so that historic storefront maintains its integrity. Just let them do their job.
I think
So
the
that's-
quantifiable standard is along the downtown mall and not on Water Street or on Market Street.
I think Carl, I'm sorry, just to say, I think Carl was just describing a pretty quantifiable standard. Those are the kinds of things, what I just heard are the kinds of things that would be reflected within a set of guidelines.
Okay. As long as those guidelines only apply to the mall, I'm fine with that.
Like, guidelines are
They apply throughout the district.
I mean, I think, generally speaking, the reason we wouldn't want to see the scenario you were talking about happen is because it involves the demolition of all the historic buildings in the mall, and reducing demolitions is, I think, the thing that is in the public interest, that is in the BAR's purview, and what replaces the demolished thing is, less impactful on the quality of life on the mall. But I understand you guys want to demolish the Wells Fargo building because it's too tall, so.
Who said that?
Stop.
Sean Tubbs is gonna report that.
Stop. All right, where are we?
Are we good with removing the transitions, or the step backs, sorry, the step backs, and just letting the BAR do this?
I can live with it.
Do we need a clause that says the BAR may do whatever?
That should not be a clause, because it should just be implied by being in a HO district.
No, I don't believe we do. I think we needed to add something if we were going to restrict the BAR's authority.
Okay. We're good.
All right.
Reducing a height impacts an affordable housing project.
We have a fantastic counsel for that. So,
All right, I'm good with that as well. I think we got 4 or 5.
all right, Rory.
This is gonna be fun.
What is this, 29 now? 5? Yeah. All right. So, I mean, we talked about this at length.
Great.
All the stuff up 29 that is not adjacent to lower intensity stuff, I'll zone it to 10, Barracks Road, Seminole Square, 7-Eleven. There's a map, if anyone wants to look at it. Come on, see it.
Again, you're next to lots of groceries, you're next to the Rivanna Trail again.
We're also doing a lot to make that area, to retrofit that area from being a horrible road into being a walkable, bikeable area. We're kind of locked into doing it anyway, because we're going to get a bunch of density up there, at the very least through the by right thing going through now. The county is talking about a very tall building up at Hibachi, or Oriental Market, which they said, according to our flum at the time, said 8 or 10 stories. They said, make it taller. And now we.
Do you want to, I'm just going to throw out for each page when we get to it, just asking any objections? And see if we can,
Yeah,
'cause
that's
it sounds
fine.
like you guys are trying to
I guess
convince
one
each
question
other and you all
here.
agree.
Yeah.
I have a small objection. East of Emmett Street, south of 29, there's a little chunk that you've got right next to.
Photos in English Inn.
Is that Bodo's there? And there's a little tiny chunk that's right there.
Say it again, what's your directions?
So
lower that, keep it where it is. For the
the southeast corner of the interchange. So it's the
Southeast corner of the
Bodo's English Inn. There's a crappy office building with a giant service parking lot, car wash.
Next to the park.
Yes, next to the disc golf course.
You're talking about
Cookout.
Morton Drive, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And then it goes down a couple parcels where the car wash and stuff are.
Right.
I mean, there's a big grade change there from the adjacent neighborhood. I am terrified at the idea of Bodo's disappearing, but they, I believe, own it, or at least the original owner does. So I've assured myself that I'm sure they would just put a Bodo's in the bottom of the new building. But that office building, that car wash, I don't see why we would encourage those to stay as they are. Cookout, I could keep Cookout, but
it
probably
wouldn't
find a
be a
So
place.
big deal.
you were suggesting what height?
He wants to leave that
whatever
CX,
you currently have it zoned
NX5 or whatever.
So we're talking about
next one.
either side of Morton Drive, basically, and behind, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
East of- but everything else as presented.
I'd support that.
You're supporting?
Support.
I'm supporting Carl's amendment.
What's your concern?
Just that it's like right next to the neighborhood. I know we have transitions, I know there's a steep drop off, but it's,
A huge drop off.
I don't think the transitions would apply because of the park space.
there's park space, but it extends a little further down adjacent to the units, south of Morton Drive.
Do you not have the same concern on the portion here that it abuts the Meadows neighborhood?
Didn't see that. I thought you only did-
There are some areas abutting, the things that actually abut the Meadows neighborhood
That's best, well,
are lower in my map, except for
Some big parcels there.
this one really weird parcel that kind of zigzags back there in a weird way. Which
so.
sort of abuts one parcel way behind it with a giant backyard. So I figured it was fine. A lot of trees too.
Well, what about right north of the interchange? You've got a bunch of them that are,
Oh, you can do this without doing Best Buy. I think that's where your transitions come into play.
So, you're
'Cause-
saying shift that to an NX
There's no nice
10.
parcels, yeah. But there's transitions that would apply there. And there's no nice parcel split that would let you do much about that. But that would be a type D transition, the most intense kind of transition. There's no street, so it's all of the things. So it's building setback, step back above 3 stories, another step back above 5 stories. So 60-foot step back, and then I think there is a grade change. And is there screening? Maybe not.
I think the parcels that touch Angus, the north side of Angus Road, so we move down towards, so I guess what
Uh-huh.
presently, yeah, that weird odd one is 2114 Angus Road there, that's the, I think that's that odd deep one that goes all the way back. That really does, that would loom over the neighborhood behind it.
I don't think that does go all the way back. You mean the neighborhood to the north?
Yeah, so you're.
Okay, that would be the Holiday Inn parcel? Is that what
No,
it
no, no,
is?
we're looking at Angus Road.
Yeah, you're looking
On-
at, that parcel's to the south of this one. The thing to the north of that is the hotel,
No, wait a minute.
the La Quinta. La Quinta? That doesn't seem right.
So Angus, no, I'm looking at the roads that actually abut Angus Road.
Yeah,
Okay,
2114.
right.
So that's this here, right? And then there's the hotel to the north, the one that's behind Cane's.
And you got the hotel that is, right, where are we highlighting here? Like,
So
where-
this is the parcel you're talking about, 2114.
Right,
And then there's this hotel behind Cane's,
right,
and then there's the neighborhood.
okay. So then back it back down, scroll down for me. So 2114, re-highlight that, if you don't mind.
I'm going to make a proposed amendment that south of 250, we leave everything east of Emmett Street as currently in our draft, and north of 250, everything west of Emmett Street, we leave as currently in our draft. And
The
go to
northeast and
NX10.
southwest, we get to it.
So next to the Cedars and next to the, is that Rugby Hills? What do they call that neighborhood?
Yeah. So,
Um,
so you're saying southwest and northeast of that interchange,
So
we
that
leave?
alone,
Yes.
And then you want to change that.
Leave this alone, but this area, everything west of Emmett and south of 250 that Rory has highlighted to be NX10, we make NX10. Everything
So-
north of 250 and east of Emmett that Rory has highlighted to be NX10, we make NX10. So that's the Kroger through,
Yep,
Hills
I'll
Drive.
support. I
So,
support that.
so
Yeah.
you're saying the office building down on Morton, the car wash, the English Inn, the Best Buy,
leave those as current.
all that stuff up there, and what's the purpose?
Those are all super low to grade too. They're all buried.
They are, it's just that it's the adjacencies.
But so, in this map for the adjacencies, except for the Best Buy, pretty much nothing's adjacent, right? Unless, well, for the northwest quadrant. And then we have the strict transition requirements.
So it's either that or do exactly as you proposed. I just don't want to prioritize one neighborhood over another. So either we do exactly as you proposed, or we,
Yeah, you're
leave
saying
out those areas next
if
to
we're
Meadows
curtailing on
and
Morton
Hills.
Drive, we need to curtail on the south side of Angus Road. I
Gotcha.
agree.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, if we curtail one, we curtail the other one. I agree.
I would say the Morton area has the least justification to do it. Big surface parking lots, old buildings,
Well,
car wash.
Since, I mean, where are we with?
Near a park.
Because I think we can end this real fast. You want to keep as your map has been proposed.
I agree generally with you that if we're not going to impose this on, yeah, I think that those two near ends, I agree with you, we not impose on either one.
Lyle?
I see these as very high opportunity areas for infill that could solve some problems.
Mhm.
I'd like to make that happen.
Keep them as Rory has proposed.
Indeed.
I think the adjacency concern is worthy of note, so I'd agree with you.
Okay, so
3-2.
I think that puts this to bed.
So let me make an argument. At least the 7-Eleven at Hydraulic and 29. I mean, that's the biggest intersection in the city, and the stuff along. I mean, I guess that one. I mean, I
Oh,
would.
yes, the intersection, okay, I know it's.
You're
technical,
talking about
but
just the Best Buy area?
I was keeping it simple and just saying, just doing those quadrants as.
Yeah.
Leaving as they are, but, yeah, the 7-Eleven that's at the intersection of Hydraulic and 250, is that whatever that is, the service station there, yes, that
Yeah.
needs to be tall.
Used to be a 7-Eleven on the other side.
I mean, and there are lots of parcels like at 29 and Angus that are nowhere near a residential area, right? I think if you're concerned about adjacency of the residential area, you take out, I mean, I've taken out most of it here already. I've already taken out the Holiday Inn that backs up to it. You know, you have that one weird parcel that looks like this next to the Holiday Inn that sort of backs up very obliquely to the very back of a lot on a cul-de-sac with a lot of backyard. And then you have the Best Buy, right, which is I mean, I would say.
It is what it
split
is.
zoning if you're gonna do that, but I mean, that's what the type D transition is for. A really intense transition requirement because of that adjacency, right? And if you're not trusting that, then I wonder if we need to change the transition requirement, because anywhere else it
Well, I
applies,
mean, I am
you're not trusting
this.
either.
We're going back to NX8, which is still quite a bit.
Are we?
Yeah, NX8 is north of 250. It's
Oh, you're
NX5
right.
that's
That is
south of
NX8.
250.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. If it were NX5, that would be more of a problem.
So-
All right, so you probably need to repeat this so James knows where we landed.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
I think I did.
you got it?
All right, just make sure.
So-
Yeah, well,
So, are we taking the entire southeast quadrant to what it is currently?
Yes.
But so,
And then the entire northeast quadrant is staying what it is currently, but did we carve out the exception for the intersection of Hydraulic?
Northwest.
I'm sorry, did I say northeast?
You did.
Northwest, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
So it's leave it with those two. What's the exception for the corner of Hydraulic?
We'll let that be NX10.
Okay. Then I have it.
all right, can I just
know you
make one more argument for that southeast quadrant? You have a much, much bigger topography change, and the neighborhood is to the southeast versus to the northwest, where there'd actually be shadows. Yes, they're different neighborhoods, treat neighborhoods separately, or equally generally, but these are very different topographical circumstances.
I think, I guess the argument would be.
And it's right next to a park.
So it's ripe for a directed rezoning request. Should somebody want to do it? And if somebody wants to build a 10-story building where Best Buy is, they're coming to NDS anyway.
Well, so this is the photos area I'm talking about,
Yeah,
not
he's
Best
looking
Buy.
at the-
That, and you're on a low-stress pathway down that road, Meadowbrook? Low-stress pathway, that road has like 300 cars a day. That gets you to the shared use path we're building up Barracks, that gets you to
Okay.
the shared use path we're building all the way down Emmett, whereas up at the Angus area, you have to somehow cross 29-250, which is a whole lot harder.
North of Morton Drive, the little tiny piece that's north of Morton Drive and south of the 250 bypass, NX10, is that what you're saying?
I would strongly urge including the two parcels south of Morton Drive, the big office building with a giant surface parking lot and the car wash.
I'll give you the piece north of Morton Drive.
And that is
Big couple of pieces. There's like 3 parcels, some very weird shaped ones.
that's a 35, 40-foot grade change.
How tall is Morton Drive again?
It is a terrace and 5 full floors above it.
Right.
The office building?
Yes.
Can we move on?
I would recommend that we go with the vote we just took a minute ago.
Okay.
All right.
Right, next.
All right. Lower Venable student area, we talked about this already. It's currently zoned at 50 feet in our UHD and our UMD. There's a little bit of R3 there that's 45 feet. We currently have it as RX3. I'm proposing changing almost all of it, but not areas in Cabell Avenue and Preston that are adjacent to lower scale districts. Those are going to stay RX3. Everything else goes up to RX5. It's supported by the FLUM. It's where all students live. Why are we downzoning a student area?
I want to pull back a little bit on the area around Preston Place.
Robinson.
Up at,
Is this New Preston?
no, this is where the Preston Court apartments.
This.
Did I get Preston Place,
circle
Preston Court,
thingy.
whatever the little circle that's
Preston
there?
Place, yeah.
Sure.
Just pull that back down to Grady.
All the way down to Grady? That's excluding the actual Preston Court apartments,
Yeah, but they're
which are
They're-
already 5.
3 stories,
Four.
aren't they?
So what do you
Wants
think,
to be 4.
what do you wanna,
Just because it's they're still I know they're fraternities, but it's still
So where are they?
it's
where-
an intact neighborhood that I don't think we need to be putting 5-story apartments in there. It's only a couple of parcels I'm taking out.
Yeah,
So show me where you're putting this out, because I'm not sure what you're pointing to.
This little chunk.
All right, so what is
$6
that?
million now.
Where are we?
God.
Show me.
Just
That apartment building is $6 million on, in our GIS.
Right.
I will never let them
so
demolish
what
that
would you like
anyway,
to
but,
do?
just leave it as the RX3.
Yeah. I do that.
Everything else as Rory has
I
proposed.
don't really care.
just on Preston Place?
Yeah, so it's they're
Those 6, 7 parcels?
4 stories.
9.
9,
10
wait, 2,
parcels.
6, 8,
Hold on, what's
I got
that?
9.
What's the street here that we're talking about? Is
or, well,
Right here.
this exactly that little off street?
do you have a drawing?
Preston Grid,
Yeah,
yeah.
where the frat houses are.
Got it.
Yeah, you're basically just downzoning a bunch of frat houses, which probably won't change except potentially for additions in the future.
We
I
can go
know.
back to rezones.
Yep. So I'm just pulling 10 of your parcels out of there.
You got it.
Now let's bring it to 10.
Wow, look at this guy, he's.
Walked all the way here. What do you got?
Amazing.
Yes, he's standing
Are you just
right.
pointing at your screen here?
Oh, yeah, right here.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
Right
I thought you had staples.
Okay. Okay, so you also want a long Cabell
here.
Yeah.
and KA at the corner of Rugby.
Cool.
I mean, that's
I think I'll take that as I'm cool with that, so we're cool with that.
These are very deep pocketed property owners. If they want to change, they can
Right,
can get a lawyer and make it happen.
Yeah, somebody make that happen.
all right, are we on to?
Lexington.
Lexington.
Lexington, oh, this is a fun one. All right. We've had a lot of discussion about the Lexington and Evergreen corridor over the last 3 years. Originally, we had this in the initial future land use map drafts as as medium all the way around and down Lexington all the way to Park. There were many valid concerns about the width of Evergreen and the width of Evergreen. So we pulled it back to Lexington, including a little bit around the bend. We have some, maybe one in particular, angry neighbors there, a certain lawyer who object to it But I have not heard any real substantive reasons why it is a bad place to put RV. It is within a short walk of downtown. It is a wide street with a complete sidewalk network, except a little bit around the bend. It slopes back in the back. There are a lot of very large additions being added to these houses right now. There's a lot of off-street parking, and there's on-street parking along the bulk of it. So we have had concerns about the bend itself, where visibility is restricted. If you have a lot more cars pulling out of driveways, you could create a dangerous condition. And so what I'm proposing is not quite to return it to the February draft that we had, but to remove the parts around the outside of the bend, so that we address those concerns, but leave one of the very limited areas where we allow RB, which could create, housing accessible to middle-income families, who are not as wealthy as the people who can buy full houses there now, in a place that is not on a busy, dangerous, loud, polluted corridor, that is in a short walking distance of downtown. So, I have this map. It removes the top of the bend. It removes a couple extra parcels on top of that because they have critical slopes in the backyard. I did leave the inside of the bend because those 4 parcels are the ones that are missing the sidewalk network. Can't really see it on this, but I do have the sidewalk's actual shape on this map. But if you leave those in there and they redevelop, you help complete the sidewalk network. I just don't see any reason to have removed this whole area. I think there was a brief discussion of it in one of our earlier meetings. And I think I was trying to verbally describe this, and I never sent out the map. And I think it might have been misinterpreted, but this is my proposal here.
Tell me about the 3 parcels on Evergreen, north of Court Lane that you...
So those were originally in there. Evergreen is much wider in that area, north of Lions Court Lane. That you also have facing Lake, right? So it's really 7 parcels along there. Evergreen doesn't tighten down until to the south of there. Really, mostly around the next bend is where it gets real tight.
All right.
I think you've got the sale.
Yeah.
I'm ambivalent. I would have rather seen the RB on Locust, but that ship has sailed.
Yeah, so, separately, I don't hate the idea of RB on Locust. I hate the idea of replacing this with Locust because, again, that's another very busy corridor, and then you're putting all of this missing middle housing on the busy corridors.
I don't need to extend this night.
But
you got it.
Fine.
All right. Next one, Tarleton Oak. We all got emails about this.
I think it was me, but bottom line is just let's make it all in X10, the whole thing. We got like 4 or 5 different zonings here, so just make it one.
You made this map?
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't map. I copied and pasted.
Yeah, I think we both. All right,
Cool.
fair enough.
That's good.
Step backs were covered. Wait, this isn't me anymore.
This might have been Kareem.
Who is this? Oh.
I don't know, it wasn't me.
We already discussed barracks.
Yeah, these are all.
Star Hill, we would have to
Well,
change the
sorry.
plum.
What are we doing on downtown? We've already
We already
dealt with
talked
that.
about
it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Barracks are done.
Star Hill requires flum work. We can't change the flum right now. Come back to it later. Same with the next one. Cedar Hill Road, I guess, was that one comment we got from the guy who owns property there,
You said,
saying he'd make a bunch of new affordable housing if we let him do it. And I think a reasonable response is come to us with the rezoning request.
come to us with that affordable housing, and we'll rezone it back for you.
Seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah,
All right. All right,
I agree
601
with that.
Brown Street, that is adjacent to the city yard. City yard is RC, but the lot adjacent to that is RA. Seems like they ought to be RC at least. And frankly, I think if we ever remediate city yard, that could probably be an RX3, could be an easy multi-use development.
Is this a flum issue?
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
I agree, but the flum had it, and we're not allowed to go above the flum right now, right?
Well, I'm trying to change the zoning. It's currently zoned RA, in our plan. I'd like to make it,
Or
RC at
Yeah,
least.
but the FLUM differentiates, the RA is implementing the general residential, and RB and RC is implementing the medium intensity residential, so that would be a change to the FLUM, which would
Okay.
have to do with the layer
Okay.
rate.
So we can't do that.
No, we can't, sorry.
So we can come back and do a bunch of flum changes later,
Right.
maybe. I will note that was one of the flum changes I proposed back in November of 2021. You guys didn't want to.
Really? We didn't?
Have a longer night,
Why?
yeah.
Oh, that was a good idea.
They were all good ideas and non-controversial.
All right, now, do you guys want to take a break before we go into the last thing?
There's one more
One more?
on this one, right?
What I missed?
JPA split zoning, we talked about 610 Harris and 612 Harris. Those are the Woodard properties he keeps emailing us about. Who proposed this one?
What was it?
These are the ones that are kind of like inside Willoughby, sort of, and they can't get to them without getting Willoughby to agree. What does the flum say in this area?
I believe that this was a FLUM issue. I'm
If
pretty
it's
sure
a
the
FLUM
FLUM
issue,
says
then we-
medium intensity.
Yeah, in that case, I mean, I would say
Yeah, I remember this.
one of them right now is RC and one's RB, so just make them both RC, and yeah, we gotta fix the flum for that one, though.
Okay, all right. 5-minute break.
Sure.
This shouldn't take
all
more
we have
than
left
30
is
minutes to get
The,
through.
last
All we
thing-
have left is special exception?
Yep.
Yes.
Does anyone even wanna
Well, Lyle does.
talk about that? have one more map thing that I thought might be worth bringing up because I feel bad not mentioning it based on how many times they've emailed us. And that is the Plymouth area in Greenleaf, or by Greenleaf Park. Plymouth and Harrow. I didn't write an email about this, but so right now it's RB. It's a short little loop of 3 streets. And I would say, I mean, my suggestion would be to keep it as RB. And so this isn't a change request, but I think it's worth, like, I want to respect the neighbors, their concerns, that we're just dismissing them and not talking about it. But I think my argument here is that it does have an entrance to Greenleaf Park right along there. It's very park proximate. I think the neighbors have made a good case for why other places should be RB, but I'm not convinced that this area should not be RB. While I'd like to see a sidewalk network develop there in the like as things change in the future, especially if any density ever actually happens there, the road widths they're talking about as being strongly concerning and warranting down zoning it to RA, to me, do not meet that threshold. I've talked about this before, but I have a lot of experience walking down Altamont Street in North Downtown, which is 20 feet curb to curb, and with a 20-unit apartment building at the end of it, plus a whole bunch of plexes and houses with ADUs, and there's just a lot of density along that street. While that street does not meet standards, it very much works as a street that you can walk down and pretty much have to walk down the middle of and then go to the side when a car is trying to pass. With the number of lots on this street and the proximity to bigger streets, I just don't see RB, 6 units by right becoming an issue rising to the level that make it improper. I think it's a perfectly reasonable place. It fits the criteria that we were choosing when we were making the future land use map, going back to 2017, 2018, of concentrating density near parks because you need less of a yard if you have a giant park right next to you. And that, I think, would be my what I would say to the neighbors there as the reason to do it. We can't just put all the RB along dangerous, busy corridors where you'll die if you walk down the street. It's okay for some of them to be on kind of quiet side streets.
So the neighborhoods want it to be RA.
Yeah.
And you're lobbying to keep it as RB.
Yeah.
Is this Altamont?
No, this is Plymouth Harrow, just south of Greenleaf Park, north of Westwood.
Oxford Circle.
Yep, Oxford Circle.
Well, it's currently RB, right?
Yes. So I'm not advocating changing anything. I just thought it's worth
Good-
discussing.
Good of you to talk about it. Special exemption permit.
So this is, we discussed this at our last meeting, the desire was for a special exception permit process. This is offering that, it's specifying discrete sections from which one can get a special exception, identifies a set of, a process and a criteria for that review. Notably, this process does not include a public hearing. It is simply a decision and recommendation, recommendation from Planning Commission and a decision by council. There is the ability to condition that decision. What else can I say about it? Has everyone had a chance to review it?
I'm just skimming it again.
It roughly mirrors in some ways what is said about the criteria and such for special use permits, but those criteria are narrowed down to focus on really the issues that are at play with the type of exception we're talking about. Uses having much a broader range of things that one would consider.
What is your thinking about bypassing the public hearing? Because you,
Well, ultimately, the state law allows that option in a special exception process. So that's,
So
And it's
based on
focused
what I
on-
heard from you guys,
Yeah.
that gave us the sense that there was a looks like Sharon's going to jump in and help me with this one, but.
Yes, James is correct. There is no requirement for a public hearing for special exceptions. And we've scrubbed the code pretty closely on that. That's different from whether you all, as a policy decision, believe that you can handle this process without public hearings.
Exactly.
So I think it makes lots of sense. We talked about it being streamlined. These are pretty minor form things. I just worry that 15.2, 2310 says no special exceptions or variances shall be authorized except after notice and hearing as required by 15.2, 2204.
Where are you reading?
Actually, if I might, Mr. Chairman, we looked through that specifically, as well as some other sections, and we concluded that that did not mandate a public hearing requirement. But if there was one, then we'd have to follow 2204.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I believe also, Sharon, before you log off, that we did also conclude that this did not have to go to the planning commission.
That is correct.
Just letting you guys know.
So I like everything you're doing here with the exception of the public hearing. I think that our public would really want to be given the opportunity to tell us what they think and watch our deliberations when we offer exemptions like this. I mean, they're not significant, but I know our public, I know our community, and they want a chance to speak to us. That's
So
just my.
they could always speak in general public comment like we do with critical slope waivers now, right? And I guess if we found that, like with critical slope waivers, that everyone was speaking at all of them, and then we're really mad that it wasn't a real public hearing, we could always change it later. But my guess would be that most people aren't going to be complaining about transparency standards, I would think.
Yeah, for physical dimensional standards that are, you know.
As outlined in those that are in this section. So it's all the physical dimensional standards that show up in your district standards, with the exceptions of dwelling units per lot, building height and stories, or development bonuses. So those things cannot be accepted. And then I'm just going to real quick make sure I remember exactly which sections.
So building height and
Identified.
feet could be accepted?
3, 5, 7, and 8.
Yes.
Huh.
That's the notion. Now you
Feels
can-
like more reason to make it 3.5, but
So blocks, so we've said the section on blocks and connectivity, the physical standards within those, access and parking, transitions, and the fences and walls.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
otherwise, we did not, for example, signs and lighting. We felt that the standards are what the standards are, and there's not a reason to be debating those.
so, you know, I guess the argument here is that we're dealing with, you know, with sort of a block or you know, a sort of a block or massing issue like that, that the circumstances on the ground would virtually require or make it much simpler to do it way X than way Y. Does that make sense to NDS? And if the answer is yes, then we move forward. It is about physical dimensions and making things work, not necessarily about substantive. Yeah, it's a backstop for us making mistakes here.
That's
How we put it together.
effectively what it comes
Yeah.
down to,
Yeah.
yes.
I can get comfortable with what you guys are saying.
All right.
All right, got it.
I have one more thing in section 3. I sent an email to you guys about it. It didn't make it into the thing. Section 3.6.
Oh, that's right. Are we done with this?
Oh.
Are we
yeah.
done with?
Sorry.
Big
thought we
section?
were-
I would just like to note that I'm concerned that this could lead to bad practice, and I'd like to watch this one very closely.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, if we see a lot of people asking for this over and over and over again, I think that's a flag that we've got an issue with our zoning, or we're pushing people to a special exemption process inappropriately.
So I think that is absolutely something, from my perspective, I already had the intention that if we were seeing a lot of issues, leaving aside this, if we were seeing a lot of issues around something, that's something we would formulate into a amendment,
Yeah.
the ordinance.
Okay.
Give Sharon a moment to speak.
You're on mute.
I'm just echoing what you said, James. This should not be used to kind of just um, erratically give waivers from requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's self-correcting. If you find, I'm absolutely overwhelmed with these, or I'm either because everyone's trying to do an end run around the rules, or the rules are, I mean, you'll throw up you'll flow a flag on the flag, and we'll do something else. Makes sense to me.
Article 3.
3.6.2.c. Amusement enterprises, circuses, carnivals, etc. Temporary. We have must provide parking sufficient to accommodate the number of persons expected to attend, as determined by the administrator based on other similar events. That's in the current ordinance. And we added a section 5, must provide parking for persons expected to attend the event, no fewer than one space per 4 persons of the capacity of the site as determined by the administrator. So it's adding a minimum that the administrator can't waive. The thing that reminded me of this was walking to last week's meeting, seeing all of the carnival signs on the street at Mad Bull, which does not have any parking and would be banned, except that Mad Bull is owned by UVA and isn't subject to zoning. I would at least strike 5. I don't know why we need to have parking requirements. I mean, we talked about the Mountain View Church a while ago, how they used to have fairs in their parking lots. And I mean, I think if you're having a fair, a block party or something, a carnival, you should be allowed to use on-street parking. I feel like that's how you have carnivals in a church.
And the way it's worded, it is in fact saying, we assume that there's going to be, everyone is going to arrive by car with 4 people in the car, which is just, when you say it out loud, is silly on its face.
It's the only parking requirement we have in the code for some reason, which we're otherwise removing all the parking requirements.
Just note that the differentiation here is that in the other scenarios, we're talking about permanent.
Sure.
Right, where we're basically saying that the developer is in the best place to determine the actual need, right?
Mhm.
And so the owner of the property or whomever. In this case, where it's a temporary, ferial, in and out use, there's no interest in that. The carnival is not necessarily going to have a market-driven concern about providing parking when they can make use of the overflowing parking on the street or whatever.
But it's a temporary,
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Look,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to
see that,
I'm trying
yeah.
to help with the differentiation, because I had the same thought when I looked at it, but to me, there is a differentiation, because it's a temporary use where, I don't know, it can have a big impact on adjacent areas.
Yeah, with no way to waive it. You're basically saying carnivals are illegal in neighborhoods, in a neighborhood center like a church, which is what the current code says. I mean, I say we remove section 5 no matter what, let the administrator determine it. If you want to leave 1 in there and the administrator can determine it as they like, and maybe, I mean, somehow Mount View has been having these fairs, I guess. So I don't know if it's just not enforced very strictly, or, I mean, should we have cars parking in Mad Bull for the fraternity sorority carnival thing, or it just seems a little
I just know it
mean-spirited.
doesn't actually say, number 5 does not say on-site.
So they just
Yeah.
need to have explained their parking plan.
Right.
All right, that's not unreasonable. What are you gonna do?
How
about
about we change all of it to the thing that we normally say about having a parking action plan approved by the, not action, whatever it was, parking plan approved by the zoning administrator?
Management plan?
No.
No, the thing we've been saying in SCPs recently, parking
Yeah.
management plan.
Parking minute, yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
You got the sound.
I have one. I'm sorry.
Please.
First, let me say that I do not like chain link fences. whenever I get a chance to remove a chain link fence, I do it, and it's come up a few times. Our zoning bans chain link fences. I don't think that makes sense. I don't understand.
No, it, we
we
had to
got
kill
rid of
that because of, wouldn't that get
We talked
redacted?
about
It's
it,
in
but
this
it's still
one.
in here.
But I thought we were, didn't we, wasn't there somebody that the tentative conclusion reached that we really needed to pull it? Is that the?
I propose that we strike 4.8.1C1D.
See, you're in a section ahead of us.
In front
Living
or
in the
street
future.
side yards. So that's only,
Is that true?
Because we're doing 4 next.
oh, that's true,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I thought
Yeah.
it was-
Hold on to that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was one of my issues too. and, you know,
Yeah,
it's like-
I was a little confused.
Apologies.
So, are there any questions about the answers we got to the questions?
Let's get back to that.
I'm good, thank you.
Any questions about the answers we got to the questions? Guys all happy?
Just that, James, please remember to look into whether, you can get the height bonus based on just doing a floor of residential.
Yeah, that's a different question than what we understood the question to be, yeah.
All right.
Right, so a question that I'm required to ask, are we ready to make a final recommendation to council? Mr. Schwartz?
I believe we are not ready, and we should continue our discussion at the next scheduled opportunity.
Which would be when, Ms. Creasy?
We had general consensus from a majority that October 4th, which is next Wednesday, would be an available date. I didn't hear from Mr. Habab. He's the only one I haven't heard from. Council will be meeting on that Tuesday, so the Wednesday seems to be a day that's open, and we have space to hold the meeting.
And we would meet at 5 o'clock in City Space?
Yes.
So I guess you're moving that we continue until 5 o'clock
Yes.
next Wednesday in City Space?
I am.
That's a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions, any objections? Okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we adjourn, and I am, much to the disappointment of our mayor, not going to mention Johnny Appleseed, which I just did. But I would point out, as we are slogging our way through this, that today marks the let's say from 1580, September 26, 1580, the Golden Hind, Francis Drake's ship, sailed into Plymouth, having left it in December of 1577, circumnavigating the entire globe, left with 4 ships, arrived with 1. On that ship, only lost 1 person. But even after that, his trip still wasn't over, because when he arrived, he asked a fishing vessel, who is Elizabeth still queen, and is England at war or not? And he still had to troop all the way up in London to get knighted. So we are in the last 1-yard line. Drake wanted to quit and go to bed. He didn't. We shouldn't either.
Is there a motion there somewhere?
No, that was it. No, I was a move. I said motion. I moved we adjourn, and I started with that. You just got lost because it was so long ago.
Is there a second?
Second.
Peace out.